Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching first part of What If Team 7 accidentally goes to an unknown time period. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The Hokage's room, all right. Perhaps the pile will shrink if I visualize it as such. When Tsunade opened her eyes, the pile of documents loomed over her. Ow! Tsunade exclaimed in pain. She swept the stack off the desk with a slash of her hand. The floor was covered in a sea of white reports that were strewn all over the room. From the door came a gentle knock. Akunochi with pink hair poked her head into the space. She rolled her eyes as she saw the papers strewn all over the room and Tsunade rubbing her temples hard. She's having another episode, which is great. With her eyes still closed, Tsunade whispered, "Ah, Sakura. Come in." Sakura entered the office with caution. Previous experience had taught her to be alert when Tsunade was having a breakdown. Tsunade went on, "I have a mission for you and your team." Sakura looked up expectantly at that. It had been nearly 3 months since she had a mission. Tsunade paused for dramatic effect before continuing, "Last night, an unknown ninja broke into the tower and stole a piece of vital information. A scroll, containing a forbidden jutsu that hasn't been used since before the first Hokage. I need you and your team to track down this ninja and retrieve the information," Tsunade said. Sakura said, "Okay. But what do we do when we find the nuke.nin? Tsunade gave Sakura an almost lethal gleam that she had never seen before. Tsunade deadpanned, "We'll take him, dead or alive." Sakura's gaze expanded. Tsunade was someone she had always known to give everyone a chance at success. "I'm sorry for saying this, Lady Tsunade, but that's a little unlike you," Sakura said. Veins appeared on Tsunade's forehead and her eye twitched. "Sakura, this is a very serious matter. If this jutsu falls into the wrong hands, it could mean the end of our way of life. If this person has already seen the content inside the scroll, they will have to be destroyed to keep the information from getting out," Tsunade said calmly, causing Sakura to cringe as she waited for the explosion. Sakura gave a sympathetic nod, and Tsunade grinned wearily as she rummaged through some of the papers on her desk, retrieved a small gray scroll, and tossed it into Sakura's eager hands. "Give Kakashi that. The mission and all the information we know about the ninja's destination are briefed. You must depart as soon as you can." Rejected, Sakura bowed and went to locate her team after Tsunade concluded. Field of training. Both ninja had minor cuts and bruises, their uniforms were torn in many places, and there were smoking craters all over the clearing, the ground jarring upwards in several places, and Kakashi and Naruto were panting heavily. Kakashi grinned. "Naruto, not bad," Kakashi said, "You've improved." Naruto laughed. It had been nearly a year since the blonde had returned to the village, and Kakashi had changed his clothes once more. He was wearing a black hooded jacket with an orange swirl on the back, a dark blood-red shirt underneath, Tsunade's necklace around his neck, black pants, and the traditional ninja shoes. "Same to you, Kakashi." "Sensei." Kakashi walked over to where the new Chunin was slumped over. "I must take a rest." Naruto gasped, "I'm going to faint." "Are you exhausted already? Where is your supposedly limitless energy source?" Kakashi joked, and Naruto simply rolled his eyes at him before scuttling over to where Kakashi was sitting. For a few minutes, the two just lay on the ground, catching their breath. "Those Kaiden jutsu are working for you." Once his heart rate had stabilized, Kakashi said, "Keep it up." Naruto grinned in appreciation. "Hey, will you teach me some Doden jutsu?" he said, darting up into an upright position. Kakashi nodded and said, "I'd like to know which one you used in the bell test." Kakashi responded sharply, "Most likely, but you have to master Kaiden first." Naruto moaned, "You'll kill me before then." Sakura jogged up to them at that precise moment, beaming broadly. "Kakashi. Sensei. Hello." Naruto. Sakura slid to a halt in front of them and called out. Kakashi heaved to his feet and said, "Hello, Sakura." Naruto stumbled up to join the two. "Hey, Sakura. Chan," Naruto exclaimed, flashing his famous smile, to which Sakura returned the warm greeting. "I've already told you, Naruto," she replied, "just call me Sakura." Naruto shrugged and fell to the ground. "Oh no. Never in my life have I felt so worn out." Kakashi laughed to himself before turning back to see what news his student had brought him. Naruto yelled as loudly as he could manage. "What do we have here, Sakura?" As Sakura gave him the scroll, Kakashi inquired. "We were given this mission by Tsunade." Sakura responded, "She told me to leave as soon as possible, and Kakashi glanced quickly at the parchment, his face going pale as he read it. Damn. This is bad. This jutsu is. Kakashi's hands were shaking, and his eyes were filled with pure terror. Sakura and Naruto looked at each other anxiously. Kakashi. Sensei? Sakura whispered. Kakashi shook himself out of his reverie and glanced around, as though he didn't know where he was. Are you okay, Kakashi? Naruto continued. You don't look out of it. Kakashi gave him a feeble smile in return. I'm all right. Just meet at the gate in half an hour, Kakashi stammered, then faded away with Shunshin. Sakura gave Naruto a worried, unsure look before turning to leave. Half an hour later, when Naruto saw that Kakashi had arrived before him, his eyes widened in surprise and he leapt down from the tree he had landed in. You arrived before me? Naruto cried out, that's a first? Kakashi gave him a menacing glare and began to pace. Where is Sakura? He demanded nervously. Kakashi huffed in exasperation and Naruto merely shrugged. Sakura fled the busy streets a few minutes later. I apologize, folks. The washing machine had this problem. Sakura apologetically rubbed the back of her head and gasped, it's a long story. Kakashi simply nodded in agreement before pirouetting on his heel and briskly leaving the village. Sakura whispered, what's up with Kakashi, sensei? As she looked at Naruto. Naruto responded solemnly, I don't know, but it's starting to give me a bad feeling. He then trailed behind Kakashi. Have you retrieved the scroll, Sasuke-kun? Whispered through the boy's microphone, a snake-like voice. Yes, I do possess the jutsu you asked for, Lord Orochimaru. The raven-haired boy responded. I'm on my way back now, as he leapt wildly from his former residence, the wind rushing past. All right. Even though the Leaf Village didn't give him the power he desired, that didn't mean he wanted everyone dead. Perhaps if I can flee quickly enough, I can use this jutsu for my own power, to kill my brother, so no innocent people would die. Orochimaru cackled, as long as no one follows you, then we will finally achieve our goal. The destruction of the Leaf Village, and every one of its pathetic people. Sasuke felt a twinge of regret. Kun Sasuke? Have you changed your mind about our plans? With a note of contempt in his voice, Orochimaru hissed. Sasuke shook away the thought and the pity he had briefly felt. Not Orochimaru, of course. We'll move forward, Sasuke replied, his words not matching his thoughts. Orochimaru grinned and said, yes, my plan to destroy the Leaf Village will finally come to pass. 5 hours later. The sun filtered through the trees, creating a carpet of sunlight across the grassy floors as Team 7, led by Pakken, dashed into a large clearing deep in the Koreana forest, which lay close to the southern border of the rice country. An old well, surrounded by dead leaves and vines, stood boldly among the green in the far left corner, and Pakken scurried to the center of the cove. Pakken looked back at the shinobi and said, the trail ends here. Kakashi nodded, a little let down. Before letting go of the tracker dog, he said, thanks for the help, Pakken. Naruto looked around, carefully examining the tree edges. Naruto confirmed, he's right, I can't sense anything, or in this case, anyone. Kakashi nodded silently in agreement, and for a brief period of time, the only sounds were the wind rustling the leaves and the occasional bird chirping. An evil cackling reverberated through the clearing as a huge shuriken thundered out of the shadows, and Naruto whipped out a kunai and raised it, blocking the oncoming star. He was pushed back, still trying to recover from the impact, and they all slipped into a defensive stance, waiting for another attack. Naruto thought, it can't be that laughter. Then a white-robed, raven-haired boy with a sword strapped to his back emerged from the shadows, holding a scroll tightly. Sakura gasped, and Kakashi's visible eye widened, while Naruto clenched his teeth and screamed so evilly that it nearly made the trees tremble. Sasuke. Naruto thought, it can't be that laughter. Then a white-robed, raven-haired boy with a sword strapped to his back emerged from the shadows, holding a scroll tightly. Sakura gasped, and Kakashi's visible eye widened, while Naruto clenched his teeth and screamed so evilly that it nearly made the trees tremble. Sasuke. Kakashi stayed in his stance, kunai at the ready, while Sakura cowered and trembled behind him as the ninja stood in the clearing, initially just staring at each other in utter hatred. Then, suddenly, Naruto and Sasuke erupted into action, leaping at each other in rage and rapidly making hand signals. Dai Enden, Kaden! Sasuke yelled, propelling a massive ball of fire out of his mouth that engulfed the boy's body as it rushed blindingly toward the blonde shinobi. Naruto. A clone! Sakura screamed in horror as she watched her friend's charred body drop to the ground and then vanish with a puff of smoke. Sasuke's gaze scanned the area, looking for his target, but a growl of defiance resounded behind him. Naruto was running fast toward the boy with the raven hair, a clone at his side, and a newly formed Rasengan spinning brightly in the palm of his outstretched hand. But he disappeared in a cloud of dust as the attack was about to hit Sasuke's chest. Naruto sagged, taking a deep breath, and Sasuke appeared behind him, sword overhead, poised for a death blow. He brought the blade down quickly, but was stopped by a kunai that Naruto had quickly whipped out. A hiss. Like laughter erupted from the tree shadows as the two stood panting in the middle of their battlefield. Then a new figure entered the scene. A man who was hated by everyone and wanted in every nation, who turned out to be Orochimaru, one of the 3 legendary Sannin. He grinned evilly as his eyes took in the scene. "Oh, Naruto-kun. It's great to see you once more. I'm surprised that the Akatsuki didn't get to you first," Orochimaru said with a broad, smug smile. Naruto gritted his teeth in rage, and Sasuke saw an opportunity to strike with a chakra enhanced foot, kicking him squarely in the middle of his stomach. The ninja flew back, landing at his sensei and teammates' feet. "Naruto." Sasuke's eyebrows shot up in curiosity as Sakura cried out and hurried to her fallen teammate's side. Naruto grunted in pain, his eyes closed tightly, and a crease of agony crossed his forehead. Sakura's hands were overcome by chakra and she placed them on Naruto's chest, healing any injuries he had already sustained. He watched Sakura closely as she worked and said, "So I see our little Sakura has learned a new trick." Sakura flinched as he bore her back with his eyes, and Naruto slowly sat up with Sakura's assistance, clutching his side as a fresh wave of pain shot through his body. "The boy has determination, I'll give him that. With the strength Sasuke-kun now possesses, that kick should have broken a rib or two at the very least," Naruto said, grinning his typical silly smile, and stumbled unsteadily to his feet, facing his opponent once more. Orochimaru laughed quietly in amusement. Sakura's worried eyes watched Naruto as he stood to face his longtime rival, but before he could move, Sasuke vanished with lightning speed and reappeared behind him, striking his back with a bone breaking blow. Naruto rolled away, eventually landing on the other side of the clearing, and Sasuke strode calmly over to where the blonde lay, crippled with agony, picking him up by the collar and lifting him to his face so they were eye level. Sasuke smirked and muttered, "You're pathetic." Then, with all of his strength, he drew back his arm and threw Naruto onto his side, forcing the air out of his lungs in a rush. Sakura stared back at him in fear, grinning encouragingly at him, but his beam was weak, and she could see the masked pain in his eyes and couldn't understand why he wouldn't give up. Sakura was unable to control herself after Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but Sasuke brought his foot down on his back with such force that it created a tiny crater in the ground the size of Naruto's body. "Naruto, please stop. You're in pain." "Sasuke, please stop, or I'll fight you," Sakura yelled in a panic, her eyes full of tears. "You have to stop, Naruto-kun," Orochimaru hissed, "because if you don't, Sasuke-kun will kill you." Naruto simply closed his eyes and his body went limp, and Sakura stared at his motionless form while tears streamed down the side of her face. "No," she muttered, her body trembling violently, and Sasuke looked down at Naruto's body in triumph. Then, a raging aura filled the clearing, circling around Naruto's unconscious figure, and his eyes widened in shock as he grabbed him by the ankle and embedded his claws into his leg. Sasuke winced, but he kept his eyes on his opponent, and Naruto lifted him off of him and threw him towards Orochimaru, landing at his master's feet with blood streaming from his open wounds. "So, is this how it ends? My life taken by the hands of a loser? No, this won't be how my demise will go." Naruto was at Sasuke's side again in a flash, this time firmly grasping his arm and throwing him over his shoulder into a nearby tree. Sasuke gasped as his body flew through the base of the tree, then broke the bark of another. He squinted through the encroaching unconsciousness, watching Naruto slowly make his way toward him. Naruto roared before charging the final few yards at Sasuke's motionless body, throwing out his fist, ready to end the fight, while Sasuke activated his Sharingan, his eyes shooting from a charcoal black to a deep crimson with 3 ebony tones swimming within the red. Only seconds before impact, Sasuke's hand caught Naruto's, and when Naruto stopped short, he smirked in triumph, staring at him with a look of hate and rage. Sasuke's skin changed from pale to light gray, and a dark black diamond shape appeared on the bridge of his nose. His hair turned dark purple, and his nails grew in the same way Naruto's did. Hand. Like wings tore from his back, giving him a look straight out of a horror film. Kakashi's eyes narrowed, and Sakura gasped at Sasuke's new form. Naruto had seen this form before, in the Valley of the End, when Sasuke had broken his bonds with him and all of the Leaf Village, and the memory evoked new anger and despair, causing a tail to emerge from the chakra that had engulfed his body. Sasuke pushed Naruto away with his newfound strength, causing them both to slide backward a few feet. Naruto let out a growl that rumbled from his throat and vanished faster than light, so quickly, in fact, that not even the Sharingan could detect his movements. Naruto appeared behind him, a Rasengan with pieces of red and blue chakra swirling together in his hand, and before Sasuke knew what was happening, he slammed it into his back, sending him spiraling, nearly hitting Orochimaru, but missing him by a small margin. Sasuke's eyes searched the trees around him in a desperate attempt to find the blonde shinobi. Orochimaru was disgusted and disappointed by his student, who had let him down. Sasuke looked up at his master beggingly, saying, "I need more power. Give me more, please." Sasuke screamed, his hand reaching upward, and Orochimaru turned away, snickering as he stared at his hand as though it were the most repulsive thing in the entire universe. Orochimaru merely chuckled, a laugh so ominous that even a Junin would want to hide in a corner. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, a wave of sadness passed across his face, but he quickly pushed it back down. You traitor," Sasuke spat. "No, you have let me down, Sasuke-kun." After saying, "You are no longer of any use to me now," he started to bury himself in the ground. Sasuke attempted to crawl over to stop him, but it was too late. His transformation gradually dispersed, revealing a battered and broken body that was known as Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto's form also receded, and he was watching him, feeling a wave of guilt wash over him. Sasuke stared blankly at the spot where his former master had stood just moments before. He began, "Listen Sasuke, I'm sore." But before he could say anything more, Sasuke yelled, "Stop talking. My one and only chance to obtain the power I had sought and trained for was taken away by you. I will never be able to kill Itachi without that power, and you'll pay for that. He took advantage of you, Sasuke." In an attempt to reason with him, Naruto replied, "He was going to steal your body for himself." However, Sasuke was unyielding and didn't trust a word Naruto said. "Lying," he yelled, and then abruptly jumped at Naruto, knocking him off balance. The two wrestled, each attempting to establish dominance, and gradually approached the ancient well. "Watch out, Naruto!" Sakura cried out in warning, but her cries were ignored, and after a final shove, the two fell over the edge and plunged into the shadowy abyss. Unexpectedly, he jumped at Naruto and knocked him off balance. The two wrestled, each attempting to gain control, and gradually approached the ancient well. "Naruto, take caution!" Sakura cried out in warning, but her cries were ignored, and after a final shove, the two fell over the edge and plunged into the shadowy abyss. Sakura hurried to the well and peered over the edge into the darkness, staring in horror as the bodies of both boys threw themselves over the edge. "Naruto! Sasuke!" she yelled in the hopes of seeing the ninja or even hearing back. "Yep, they're dead," Kakashi said nonchalantly, and Sakura glared daggers at her sensei, his remark severely damaging her confidence that the two weren't in a broken heap at the bottom of the well. However, all you could hear was the faint drip of a water leak somewhere in the bottom of the wooden hole. "No, they're not," Sakura replied, mumbling the final line, "I'm sure they're fine. At least I hope." Kakashi simply shrugged doubtfully before swinging one leg over the side of the well's wall. "What are you doing?" Sakura asked incredulously. "I don't feel like I'm alone in the spooky woods." Kakashi gave her a doubtful look before descending further into the shadowy pool. "How does it appear? I'll follow them inside. Without assistance, they will undoubtedly perish." Sakura could only nod as she watched his shining white head disappear into the darkness. "Now, hold on to the rope," he replied, passing her one end of a rope, the other end tied tightly around his waist. Slowly, the rope passed through her hands as Kakashi descended farther and lower. "My goodness!" When Kakashi abruptly yelled, Sakura jumped out of her skin, scurried to the edge, and squinted into the darkness in an attempt to locate her sensei. "Kakashi. Sensei? Are you okay?" Fearing the worst, she called out in terror. When she heard Kakashi's voice yell out, Sakura jumped with surprise because at first there was no response, leading her to believe her suspicions. "Yes, I'm all right. This well is simply very deep." Sakura relaxed and rolled her eyes, thinking, "I swear, that man can be more annoying than Naruto." The rope began to move again, indicating that Kakashi had continued. Sakura let her gaze roam the clearing, admiring the scenery. If it weren't for the current events, she would have truly enjoyed the landscaping. At that moment, she realized the rope was now whizzing through her hands, rapidly using up the slack at her feet, and she tightened her grip in an effort to stop the rapidly falling man she was now supporting. Her feet began to creep towards the well, threatening to drag her over as well, and she grunted when the weight made her knees want to give out. She leaned as far back as she could, hoping to prevent her sensei from falling any further, but the force was too great, and the rope gave one last sharp tug, pulling her over the well's edge. Within the well, Sakura let go of the rope and began to fall freely, though she tried to keep her eyes open because the wind was tearing at her face and burning them. She closed them, but she instinctively threw out her arms to break her fall. After a while, she opened her eyes a crack, suspicious that she hadn't hit the ground yet, and was shocked to see a bright circle of light rapidly approaching her. The next thing she knew, she was being thrown from the damp and dark well onto a soft bed of grass. Sakura opened her eyes cautiously and gaped at what she saw. She was lying in the middle of a gorgeous meadow with hills rolling across the vast expanse of land, with a lush forest lining one side, a sparkling lake to her right, and a deep shadow of trees protecting the well behind her. The sight made her feel so at ease and liberated. Then memories of what had happened came back to her in a flash, and she sprang to her feet, looking around her in a desperate scurry, and ran to where a hill sloped neatly into the flatlands, far below, where she saw Naruto and Sasuke still wrestling, with Kakashi standing close by, attempting to break them up. Running quickly down the hillside, Sakura made her way to her sensei, who was standing off to the side with his nose deep in his book. She gave him a crazy look and threw up her arms in exasperation. Whatever happened to separating them? She yelled, gesturing to the two fighting in the dust, and Kakashi merely shrugged. Too much labor. He turned a page and said, they'll eventually tire, or at least knock each other out. Sakura rolled her eyes at the Junin's indolence and moved to where Naruto had Sasuke in a headlock. Are you two completely done? She said, giving them a look that said she meant business. They looked at her, then at each other, and then they resumed fighting. With steam practically coming out of the pink-haired teen's ears, she rushed over and grabbed each boy by the collar of their shirts, pulling them apart, and even when she held them at arm's length, they were still reaching out to each other like a child pleading for his toy back. Sakura struck both of their heads, dropped them at her feet, and stalked back over to Kakashi, who was laughing under his breath but knew enough to keep it from Sakura to spare him a vicious beating. Where are we now? Sakura sighed at the boy's immature behavior, asking, when will they ever grow up? As she plopped exhaustedly to the ground. Naruto and Sasuke used this time to take their first glance around, avoiding eye contact. It's incredible. Naruto exhaled in amazement at what he saw, saying, I've never seen anything like this in any of the nations me and Ero Sennin went to. He had never remembered anything so pure in any of the countries, not even the recently formed Ice Country, which had nothing as empty and lovely as this. Sasuke continued, it seems like the world is young once more, untarnished by the world of wars and violence. Naruto gave Sasuke a shady glance before turning back to his sensei. So, exactly what happened just now? Sasuke walked over to join them, but instead of sitting down, he stood solitary off to the side in silent disdain with a bored expression on his face. Naruto said this as he sat down next to Sakura, who was also staring up at Kakashi, wanting an explanation of what had happened and where they were. Sasuke said, we feel down a well, Dobi. I am aware of that, Naruto shot back, glaring at the ninja with the raven hair. Where are we, after all? The well must have flowed like a horseshoe and emerged somewhere outside the forest. Kakashi said matter of factly, we probably just came out of the other side. Naruto shook his head doubtfully as the three ninjas stared at him incredulously. How did we fall out, then? Kakashi sighed and heaved himself up, and the three teenagers gazed at him curiously. We would have hit the bottom and then had to climb out, he replied logically, which was extremely unusual for the blonde shinobi. All right, get up. Kakashi said, we might as well look around for someone to give us directions to town. He tossed Sakura's and Naruto's bags in their laps and started to leave, heaving his bag onto his shoulder with a great motion. Hello. Sasuke simply HNNED, and shuffled after his former teammates and comrades, and the two responded and ran after their sensei's vanishing figure. 2 hours later, they were walking in a single file line, with Kakashi in front and Sakura, Naruto, and Sasuke in the back. Sakura hadn't thought it was a great idea to put Sasuke and Naruto together, but Kakashi simply said that it was a good way to rekindle their friendship. Kakashi, I seriously think we're lost. Naruto pouted as they wandered across the field, and Sakura rolled her eyes. This wasn't the blonde's first outburst of the obvious in the last few hours. Stop talking, Dobi. Sasuke muttered, we'll get there when we get there. Naruto turned to confront the sullen teenager, glaring daggers at the frowning boy in front of him and narrowing his eyes. With his teeth clenched, Naruto swore, you're really starting to get on my nerves. Sasuke simply grinned and shoved Naruto away, but Naruto snarled a demon-like growl in return, which was definitely not helping the friendship situation. Sasuke turned his head with a deadly yet inquisitive expression in his eye. That growl. I remember it from the Valley of the End. But what is it? I don't remember. Sasuke and Naruto exchanged a final glare before sprinting to catch up. Come on guys, or we'll leave you behind, Kakashi called, already so far away from the two boys that they could hardly see him. So, Kakashi, when will we locate that village once more? Sasuke casually looked around the forest, following patterns in the trees with his eyes, while Naruto and Sasuke had finally caught up. We've been walking for hours in the direction of the town, but still no sign, Sakura analyzed. Kakashi closed his eye, lost in thought, pinched the bridge of his nose, scrunched up his eyes, and stopped walking. At last, Kakashi said, we'll spend tonight here. If we continue any further, we may die of exhaustion. With a sigh of relief, they all dropped their packs and began searching for the village, or at least someone who could tell them where to find it, tomorrow. Kakashi and Naruto collected grass and dry wood, lit a fire with an explosive tag, and treated Sakura's wounds. Well, the benefits of being a ninja. As Kakashi positioned the TAGE in the middle of the woodpile and leapt back before a tiny explosion rocked the area, Naruto joked, you can start a fire without having to think. Kakashi glared at him, are you saying I'm logically impaired? He raised his eyebrows in question. Kakashi whipped a log at Naruto's head and struck him in the forehead, and Naruto grinned and replied, well, I didn't say it, but I was implying it. Ow? Kakashi, damn you. Kakashi merely laughed as Naruto sobbed and rubbed the newly developed lump on his head. He said simply, should have moved. Naruto frowned. While he is known for being simple-minded, Naruto makes fun of the Junin for being foolish. As Sakura healed a line of blood that was starting to crust over on Sasuke's back, she said, how ironic. Naruto observed her work. You're healing this traitor, but why? Naruto said, he doesn't deserve your kindness. Sakura simply went on, bandaging the last cut on the Uchiha before getting up and walking to her backpack. She knelt down on the grass, holding a water bottle in her hands, and spilled half of it on her hands, causing the dried blood to wash off them. It seems like the right thing to do, but maybe not. Would you like me to also heal you? Naruto simply gave a head shake. It would be a waste of your chakra. No, Sakura simply shrugged, but Naruto smiled confidently and said, I'll be healed by morning. The deep gouge that had been there perhaps an hour ago was already a faint pink line that would have taken weeks for a normal body to heal. Don't claim I didn't warn you, though. Sakura shook herself out of her own little world and focused back into the real world. If you wake up with a severe blood infection, don't tell me I didn't say so, she said with a confident smile that vanished quickly as she thought back to the battle earlier that day. I went to heal his injuries, but they were already healing on their own. He had multiple broken ribs, but his stomach was only bruised in a matter of seconds. What powers does he have? Alright you guys, it's been a long day, get some rest. Kakashi lay down in the grass beneath a tree whose branches spread out over him like a protective roof. Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke were kicked to the curb, meaning they had to sleep outside, vulnerable to Mother Nature, but they didn't mind at all. In fact, they all had different opinions about it. Sakura liked it because she enjoyed finding the various constellations and the rush of excitement she got when she recognized a new image in the sky. Naruto feigned to be among the stars, free from the world and all its sometimes horrid nature. He was something that people looked upon with wonder and hope. And Sasuke thought his parents were up there, watching over him, smiling down on him, as two brightly shining stars. The dream of Sakura. Suddenly, 5 other figures emerged from the surrounding trees, forming a barricade the girl couldn't escape without a fight. They were dressed in black with a red bandana tied around their forehead, and they had countless swords attached to their backs that would make any knight jealous. The girl, who was about her age, was standing in the middle of a small field surrounded by thick wood, breathing deeply and keeping her eyes closed while taking in the sounds of the world. Her kimono was exquisite, with black Japanese flowers adorning its length and a vivid red background. Calmly, she opened her eyes and looked at each warrior in turn, her gaze lingering on the last one, hypnotizing him as he moved uncomfortably under her gaze, keeping his head down and avoiding her eyes. The girl acted quickly, tearing off her kimono to reveal a black suit with crimson armor wrapped tightly around her body, and drawing out a long bow. Staff, keeping it ready. The men leapt at her, swords outstretched, as they clashed, and she hopped up, landing on the blades as they clashed. The last warrior stood cowering, trying to hide in the shadows, when the girl turned to him and her eyes seemed to pierce right through him. He started running, screaming something incomprehensible the entire way. She had unarmed them all with a twist of her ankle, sending their swords flying across the clearing, and she had kicked one of them in the head, knocking him unconscious. The girl turned to face a newcomer who was wearing a golden suit and shining black armor. He was carrying only a double-bladed katana, but it had a secret that could kill rows of men with a single blow. He laughed, a laugh so cunning it would make your stomach turn. The girl heard a slow, steady clapping sound behind her. He hissed, "Very good, but not good enough." A flash came from somewhere nestled snugly in the trees, and a single arrow, set ablaze, came hurtling towards the gullible girl. However, it was too late. It ripped through the armor and came out of her chest, embedding itself in the middle of her back and causing blood to gust out upon contact. She screamed in pain, coughing up blood, and the fire burned her lungs where the arrow had entered, causing her to collapse on the ground. Upon approaching the dying girl, the man chuckled once more and motioned for the archer to pull out, which he did without hesitation. He looked down and saw the girl burn from the inside out. Then he leaned down to her side and muttered, "This is what happens when you cross Tiger Star." Then he vanished. With her last remaining energy, she used her finger to write a scrawling message in the dust she lay next to. With her eyes closed, she ventured into the world of death. The girl took in ragged breaths, everyone getting harder and harder. Her vision began to fade, the colors draining from the world. She heard her comrades calling her name, but she knew they wouldn't make it in time. Cut off Sakura's dream. Sakura startled awake, breathing in short bursts, and noticed that Naruto and Sasuke were still asleep, Naruto snoring loudly, as the sun had just risen over the horizon, its pale, weak gleam barely warming the chill she felt in her bones. She woke Naruto gently, and when he didn't react, she shook him even more. His eyes opened a little, but he jumped back when he saw Sakura's face hunched over him. "Ah!" Sakura leaned back slightly to give the blonde space while he caught his breath after he cried, frightening them both. "What's up, Sakura?" Naruto asked after his breathing stabilized. "Are you bothered by something?" Sakura shook her head quickly as she looked down and played with a piece of grass. She contemplated what she was going to say but ultimately decided to drop the whole thing. "I apologize for waking you, but it's nothing." Naruto closely examined her face and saw a heartbreaking expression as she whispered, "Go back to sleep." "I can tell by that look that it's not nothing," he said, crawling over to where she was sitting and placing himself next to her. "You can tell me," Naruto said coolly, giving her one of his famous smiles. Sakura looked into his eyes and saw only kindness and concern, then she sighed and started. "Well, I kind of freaked out last night after having this dream." Without glancing at his face, she whispered, "I was hoping I could tell you about it." Naruto nodded and moved closer to the trembling Kunoichi after noticing Sakura's serious expression. "Are you chilly?" Sakura shook her head and looked up at him as he asked in a worried manner. His sapphire eyes were full of kindness and concern, and she was fascinated by them. She felt calmed and more confident as a result. Sakura inhaled deeply before continuing. "It began in this meadow, and the odd thing was that it resembled this one quite a bit. I was unable to see the girl, but she was there. For some reason, not much else was visible, and her face was always in the shadows. Before numerous men jumped out of the trees and ambushed her, everything was calm and peaceful. She defeated them all with ease thanks to her excellent fighting skills. At this point, she was letting her words flow freely. But then there was another guy. His name was Tiger Star. This one was unique. He carried himself like a king, giving the impression that he was in charge. An archer concealed in the shadows was signaled by him, and he fired a flaming arrow at the girl. It penetrated her back completely. The girl was left to perish after the man simply laughed and turned to leave. Before she passed away, she wrote a message in the dust, but I was unable to see it clearly. Sakura stammered, but when she was dying, it was just so vivid. Tears had accumulated in her eyes, and some spilled out, streaming down her cheeks. Naruto took a position in front of the Kunoichi. "You shouldn't be concerned because it was just a dream." Sakura looked up and wiped away the tears as Naruto said, "I was all in your imagination." He smiled convincingly and said, "It was only a dream. Come on, we'd better get moving now." With a grunt, Naruto got up and approached Sasuke. The sun had already risen high in the sky, and dawn had long since passed. Naruto tried to wake up the sleeping boy by vigorously shaking him, and when he did, he glared at him before leaving. Naruto scowled after him, but he let it go because he had much more important plans. He tiptoed over to the bags and silently slipped a water bottle out of them, and then he crept over to where the silver-haired Junin was snoring softly. He began to turn the bottle over Kakashi's head while he laughed under his breath. Kakashi, holding the now empty container in his hand with a triumphant smile on his face, was up in a flash. Naruto soaked, and he laughed. I can see that we have to work on your stealth. As the boy frantically attempted to dry himself off, Sakura smiled and giggled as the soaked Naruto simply grunted in frustration and muttered, I'll get you sometime, just you wait. As he waited with his pack slung over his shoulder, Sasuke grunted, okay, if you're quite through, let's go. A few hours later, as the group paused to rest, Sakura said, Kakashi, I don't think we're going the right way. Hours before, they had strayed from their old trail and had staggered blindly through the forest. With a contemplative look on his face, Kakashi observed, I was beginning to think the same thing. The three ninja perspired. Kakashi, are you even aware of our location? The Junin shrugged, and Kakashi looked around before responding. Well, my instincts were telling me this was the way back to town. Sakura asked doubtfully. What instincts, Kakashi? Sensei, cried the shinobi. It's been 2 fucking days since you started taking us to places we don't know. Kakashi merely chuckled uneasily while scratching the back of his head as Naruto yelled and waved his arms around. Hello, what will we do at this point? Sakura asked as she collapsed to the ground in defeat, and the other ninja sighed as well. Kakashi pulled out a map and opened it fluidly, finding a crudely drawn map of the Koreana forest with towns and landmarks. He looked around, trying to match up the landforms, and his face became confused. He twisted the map around and narrowed his eyes in frustration, then pulled out another scroll. This one of the area created approximately 4,000 years prior to the first one. Okay, I finally figured out where we are, but it's unbelievable, Kakashi said, looking up at them with a puzzled expression. Naruto nodded his head and made a get dot on dot with dot it gesture with his hands. His eyes widened in shock after a few minutes of studying it. Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto leaned forward in anticipation. The map was covered with lines and shoddy drawings of what appeared to be trees, mountains, lakes, and rivers. Kakashi sighed and turned the map so that it was facing the three shinobi. He pointed to a large opening on the parchment covered with trees and said, This is the well is, or in other words, where we started. He then moved his finger across the paper, to the left corner of the map. He circled a small plot of land and said, This is where we are now, Koreana Forest's southern section. He turned and pointed to a huge tree that towered over them, its branches swinging outward to cast a canopy of shadows over the entire area. The trunk was so wide that even if the 4 ninja took hands and formed a circle around it, they wouldn't even reach halfway around it. The Tree of Life is this. It is the oldest and most revered tree in the forest, having been planted here more than 1,000,000 years ago. The problem is that the village, or at least it should, is located right here. About 40 years ago, the tree was felled so that the villagers would have a place to camp. Kakashi turned to face them and remarked, Now it's here again, and the village is nowhere in sight. Sakura shook her head in surprise. Wow. Naruto scratched his head in confusion as she said, But it's impossible, there's just no way. Hold on a minute. He said, utterly uninformed, I'm completely lost here. Rolling her eyes, Sakura said, Let me explain it in terms you can comprehend. We had a good fall. You have a long history. No longer in our time, alright? Naruto gave her a frustrated glance and said, I understand. Naruto shot back, I'm not retarded, you know. Sasuke muttered something under his breath, and Naruto turned to face the boy with the raven hair. Sas.gay, do you have something to say? Naruto muttered an insult. Oh, because I've never heard that one before, Sasuke said, laughing without humor. Dobi, you're a jerk at insulting, Sasuke shot back. Teme, would you like to try that again? The boys glared at one another for a few seconds before turning away with their arms crossed. Sakura sighed as Naruto yelled and stood up in Sasuke's face. The two of you are behaving like kids. Sakura reminded the two boys, remember the mission at hand. Sasuke grunted, and Naruto simply shrugged, but then a look of realization filled Naruto's face. What did you do with that scroll, in relation to the mission? Naruto screamed, starting a whole new argument, I saw that you had it. I'm not returning it, so you won't ever know. I'm going to master this forbidden jutsu and defeat Itachi with it. With a hint of hysteria in his voice, Sasuke remarked, You at least owe me that since you took away my only chance at power. You owe Sakura and me much more than that, though, for 3 years, you abandoned us. Naruto shouted, his stern face wavering. The Leaf Village was unable to provide me with the necessary power. Orochimaru, however, did. Sasuke responded casually, I needed that power, Naruto, and would and will do anything to get my hands on it. However, did you ever consider the impact it would have on your loved ones? Sakura was devastated when you left, and she was very sad about it. When no one else was around, you were like a brother to me. Naruto's hardened expression returned, his eyes starting to flicker red, and he said, you made me feel almost whole, for once in my life. Did you ever stop to think how it would affect us if you left? He asked, threatening to cry but pushing them away. Did you? With a few tears streaming down his face, Naruto's voice cracked as he asked, Sasuke, you were one of the only people I let in, and you had to go and screw it up. Naruto was unable to continue. When Sasuke finally awoke from the long-lasting dream, he looked at the ground, afraid to look into the sapphire pools that stared back at him with sorrow and rage, and his mask broke as a wave of sympathy, agony, pain, and mostly guilt overcame him and took hold of his body. Naruto, Sasuke began hesitantly, but Naruto stopped him with a hand gesture, and he looked up, his eyes glistening but not overflowing with tears. No, simply don't. His voice was barely audible as he whispered, I'm done. The four of them were in silence, each ruminating on their own problems. Sakura gazed thoughtfully at the blonde, who was still bent over in agony. I've never seen him break down like this before. What's happened to him? Sakura asked. So, Kakashi, what will we do? The awkward silence was broken by Naruto whispering, and Kakashi gave him a suspicious look before responding. Well, there's a small market up a little ways from here. Before we return to the well, I was considering stopping off there to restock. I hope we can get back to our time by going back through the well. This has gone on long enough. I hope Sakura and Naruto will pardon me for what I did. Naruto nodded and tilted his head to indicate Sakura and Sasuke. Sakura shuffled over quietly as Sasuke hung back. Are you coming, Sasuke? Sakura's call snapped him out of his reverie, and he gave a weak nod before stumbling after the group. Despite its small size, the village was teeming with activity. Numerous tiny huts were present, containing a range of goods, including clothing, livestock, and fruits. Even a swordsmith was present, expertly creating a long blade as children gazed in wonder. The group, ragged and exhausted, staggered into the square, blinded as newborns by the light. Naruto strode forward, gazing in awe at the village that seemed to be celebrating. He smiled weakly at a young boy who was staring at him and whispered to himself, who knew a place this small could be so busy. Interested in all the colors and sounds swirling around her, Sakura nodded in agreement. She nearly felt as though she was in a children's book. Sasuke simply looked around the place as if it were the bottom of hell with a casual scowl. Naruto muttered mockingly, calm down Sasuke, don't get too into it. Sasuke simply humphed and strode away, but Sakura stifled a laugh. Kakashi focused on the issues at hand and rolled his eyes at the absurd teenagers. Kakashi put some ryo in their outstretched hands and said, okay, Sakura, I need you to go and restock on our supply of food. Naruto, search for anything we can use as weapons. I doubt they'll be selling kunai and explosive seals. Sakura looked doubtfully at the coins and bills she was holding and said, Kakashi? Do you think this money will even be valid here? I mean, it is about 5,000 years ahead of its time. Kakashi gave a shrug. After taking out his book, Kakashi replied, I don't really know. But it's all we have, so let's hope so. Have fun. He then walked off. After exchanging a look of mutual annoyance, Naruto and Sakura left on their new missions. Sakura entered a tiny shack with a few stands selling only a few depressing excuses for fruits and vegetables. With a frustrated sigh, she approached the man who was waiting in front of the store. After carefully gathering as much food as she believed was required. Wearing a crude white tank top and black pants, he looked tough and a savage. Looking sword was strapped to his back. He had the start of a shaggy beard that hung from his chin, as if he had neglected to shave for a few weeks. With a hint of alcohol on his breath, he said, find everything you be needing? Sakura put the basket on the stand and nodded. After a cursory inspection of the merchandise, the man computed the price on what appeared to be shoddy paper. He held out his hand impatiently and said, brings you around to about 220. Sakura reluctantly took out her cash and put it in the man's hand. He gazed at the cash as though it would suddenly leap from his grasp and flee. He began to laugh after glancing back at the pink-haired Kunoichi and then at the cash. Sakura gave the merchant, who was now on the verge of tears, a questioning glance. Sakura questioned, what's so hilarious? The storekeeper took a deep breath and gave her a direct look. "You must be kidding. Take a look at this," he exclaimed, pointing to Sakura with the bills. "I've never seen this type of currency before, and a lot of money has passed through these hands." He laughed. He gazed at the cash in front of him. He asked, "Is this foreign?" The words, "You have no idea," were muttered by Sakura. The hope that the money would somehow be legitimate disappeared as her face fell. "It appears that we will have to do this the difficult way. You'll need those survival skills." Still grinning, the man threw the money back at the ninja and waved his hands, saying, "Now, if you don't have any real money, get out of here." With a sigh, Sakura left the stand. "I suppose I'll now go find Naruto." She didn't have to move at all. One rough voice yelled, "Get out of here!" One of the blonde shinobi fell out of a nearby shop. With a whoosh, the air in his lungs came on as he fell flat on his stomach. As Sakura watched Naruto stumble to his feet, she laughed. He mumbled, rubbing the back of his head, "Damn, touchy." When he saw Sakura, a smile appeared on his face. He called out, "Hey Sakura." Sakura asked, "Hey Naruto." "Same problem, huh?" While displaying a few of her unused ryo, he gave a sullen nod. Sakura laughed and said, "Hey, man, that guy was pretty rough on you." Naruto laughed. He said, "Actually, it was a chick." Sakura's eyes went wide with shock. Sakura rambled, "Are you serious?" Her voice sounded. He answered, "I know, that's what I was thinking." Sakura nodded thoughtfully. She said, "She had quite an arm though, to be able to throw you, let alone lift you." Naruto frowned a few seconds later. "Yo!" exclaimed Kakashi as he appeared from the throng. He sighed as he observed the two's empty arms. He said, "Money not valid, huh?" Sakura rolled her eyes, and Kakashi sighed, "Coulda told you that." "Well, now what?" asked Naruto. Screams suddenly resounded all around them. People were hurrying to move aside. Of what, the question was. Out of a lull in the crowd, a young boy clashed. Like Rock Lee, he wore a black jumpsuit and had cropped blonde hair. Behind him, a red sash billowed in the wind around his waist. He held an unconscious girl in his arms. Her hair was short and brown, with hints of light blue. She had on a light gray pair of pants that eventually became fishnets and shins, and a purple tank top. Another boy, with black hair cropped like the blondes, was right behind them. He was wearing something that looked a lot like the brunettes, except that it was brown instead of fishnets, and he had black armor over his suit. He had a long, thin sword securely fastened to his side. With the other boy pursuing him and nearly toppling Sakura, the first boy ran off into an ally. Just before her head hit the floor, she caught herself. The blonde boy with the girl slipped back into the middle a few moments after the majority of people had fumbled. He believed that all of the witnesses had left and that he was alone. The three shinobi had slipped his mind. When the boy approached close enough, Naruto reacted quickly and pounced on him. The boy dropped the girl he was carrying as he fell to the ground. Before her head hit the stone, Sakura leapt to her aid and grabbed her. Sakura whirled around, braced for battle, and propped her against a nearby building. Just a few feet away, Naruto and the other boy were engaged in a wrestling match. Because of how much dust the boys were kicking up, Sakura was unable to tell which one was which. "I'm worried that I might strike Naruto by accident, but what if he needs my assistance?" The brunette boy's eyes were searching and frantic as he ran back around the corner just then. The unidentified blonde gasped when she saw him. He quickly rolled into the shadows after pushing Naruto away from him. After pondering for a while, Naruto chose to let him go. He began to move slowly toward the girl, but as he got close, the brown-haired boy struck Naruto in the side, knocking him to the ground once more. He pulled out his sword, pinned Naruto by the shoulders, and roughly pressed it to his throat. The boy disregarded Sakura's horrified gasp. Unaware that he had shut his eyes, Naruto gritted his teeth and opened them. Staring him in the face, he challenged him to carry out the act, cut his throat, and put an end to it. However, the boy was looking at Naruto with surprise and bewilderment. Then, with a dark mutter, his eyes narrowed and he said, "You are not the one I want." Naruto screamed, "Yeah, no kidding. Now get off me," and gave the bigger boy a violent shove to the chest. A recognizable voice said, "Humph, getting into more trouble, Dobi?" Naruto shot back, "Shut up, Teme. Where the hell have you been?" Naruto rolled his eyes and got up, while Sasuke shrugged and merely said, "Around." The brunette, kneeling beside the fallen girl, was observing them with interest from the sidelines. He glanced warily at the pale and unconscious girl beside him, turning his focus from the fighting boys. He shook her a little and whispered, "Hey, Kaya. Can you hear me?" Sakura approached casually and knelt beside the girl. Between Sakura and the girl named Kaya, the boy raised his head and swung his sword. With a humorous glance at the blade, Sakura said, "Take it easy. I can help her." Her voice had a hypnotic undertone. The boy held his sword in place while he gave her a suspicious look. Sakura went for a low blow, adding, "If you don't let me look at her, she'll be in great pain." The boy flinched and dropped his weapon, but he continued to watch Sakura as the chakra engulfed her hand. He watched intently as his eyes grew wide and flooded with questions, but he remained silent. Sakura quickly reviewed everything and found nothing amiss. Sakura reassured, a self-assured smile spreading across her face. "Well, nothing serious. She just got a serious blow to the back nerve, which I would assume made her go unconscious. She'll wake up soon." After giving a slow nod, the boy took a seat beside the girl, who was now asleep. He quietly but sincerely said, "Thank you." Sakura simply nodded her head in agreement before moving to where Kakashi, Naruto, and Sasuke were standing and conversing. Sakura stopped beside Sasuke and said, "So, what's the plan?" Sasuke's forehead was furrowed as he squinted his eyes together in thought. His coal-black eyes lit up noticeably as an idea struck him. "Well, we could head south. If we are in the feudal era, then there should be a large village, the capital of the nations nowadays, Hokkaido. Maybe we could find someone there that could help us," said Sasuke. Naruto gave a snort. He put his arms behind his head and said, "Or, we can save ourselves all the effort and go jump back down the well again. It worked one way, why not the other?" The boy's head pricked up at the mention of the well, and he watched Naruto in increasing shock. "Either way, we need to make a decision quick. We're running critically low on food and supplies, and if we can't pay for anything, then we're seriously fucked," Kakashi said. Sakura gave a nod of agreement. After abruptly showing up at Naruto's side, the boy asked, "Are you talking about the ancient well over by Koreana Forest?" Surprised at how quickly and silently the boy could move, Naruto leapt back. Kakashi's eyes also widened a little, surprised that someone could move nearly as quickly as a typical shinobi in their time at such a primitive age. Dismissing the thought quickly, he went back to the topic of discussion. Kakashi questioned, "What do you know about it?" The boy had dubbed it the ancient well, and judging by the way the wood was starting to rot and wear away, it was old indeed. He is aware of information that may be helpful to us. Let us examine his level of knowledge. The boy chuckled. He looked at each of them in amazement and said, "I know pretty much everything about it. My ancestors built that well about 100 years ago. They said it led to another time. I never believed them, until now that is." His face suddenly lit up with understanding and realization. His voice was full of excitement as he exclaimed, "Of course. Now I know why you guys look familiar. The prophecy. How could I forget?" The four of them exchanged confused and perplexed looks. "Say wa?" inquired Naruto. The boy was so happy now that he didn't even react to Naruto's intelligent response. He didn't even seem to hear the four of them. He exclaimed, his eyes full of admiration, "You guys are heroes. Well, not yet, but you will be. I can't believe that after all this time, it will finally end." He looked very different from the boy they had seen just moments before. He had the biggest smile the shinobi had ever seen, even outshining Naruto, and he was staring directly at him. That said a lot. When Naruto yelled, "Don't take this the wrong way, but what the hell are you talking about?" the girl threw up in her sleep. After giving her a worried glance, the boy returned his focus to the poor ninja after confirming that she was okay. All he did was shake his head. Then his casual demeanor returned as he said, "It's a long story, and here isn't the place to tell it. Come on, I'll take you back to where the rest of us are." With haste, he turned away and tossed the girl onto his back. He headed for the woods after leaving the town. The four of them perspired. "Not the woods again. Oh no." Over his shoulder, the boy called back, "You guys coming or what?" The four made their choice in that instant, and a single glance revealed that they had all selected the same option. After gathering their belongings, they cautiously followed the unidentified boy back into the Koreana Forest, a hellhole. Following the strange and unknown boy who was leading them, where they did not know, the recently reunited Team 7 staggered through the forest. He needed to give a serious explanation, but not right now. Naruto whimpered, "Are we there yet?" as his voice reverberated through the trees. Since Naruto had asked this question 4 or 5 times in the last 10 minutes, the boy sighed and rolled his eyes. "Shut up. We'll get there when we get there," yelled Sakura, giving the sobbing boy a slap on the top of the head. Carefully moving the girl on his back, the boy lost himself in his thoughts. Are they indeed the long-awaited prophecy? They're not precisely what I anticipated. Naruto was also in another world, but he was speaking to Kyuubi, his prisoner, rather than to himself. The boy underestimates you. You aren't exactly what he expected. Naruto laughed. With a toothy grin. Kyuubi said, everyone always thinks about heroes like that at first. But we'll show them. Naruto grinned and said, you got some confidence, kid, I'll give you that. Kyuubi grunted, wow. That almost sounded like a compliment. Naruto shrugged, don't expect it too often. His thoughts began to return to reality. He was being rough. Shaken by someone. Through the image of Kyuubi in front of him, Sasuke's irritated voice said, yo, Dobi. Wake up, we're almost there. Sakura's face, which was quite similar to his, reappeared with the forest. Surprised, Naruto leapt back and collided with Kakashi. They both fell to the ground and spread out on the mossy surface. As Naruto picked himself up off the forest floor, he muttered, sorry, Kakashi. He brushed the twigs and leaves from his clothing. Damn boy, you're heavy. Lay off the ramen a little, shave a few pounds. Kakashi sighed. With a, you've gotta be kidding me, expression on his face, Naruto turned to face the other group members who were running away. The six entered a vast field that resembled the one where the well had spit them out after emerging from the dark forest. The boy had paused in the middle and gently set the girl down on the floor. He moved a few paces away from the group and positioned himself with his hands out in front of him, palms facing forward. His eyes narrowed in focus as he inhaled deeply. The four ninja were somewhat familiar with the blue aura emanating from his hands, which resembled a primitive chakra. What's he doing? Murmured Naruto. Sakura shrugged, not knowing at all. The boy's forehead was dripping with sweat, and he furrowed his brow in apparent strain. The air around the boy began to tremble and twist just as Naruto was ready to step in. To the shinobi's surprise, the air suddenly broke apart in front of them, revealing a rather large house. Many people, all wearing armor similar to the boys and girls, were bustling around it. A few of them looked up and gave the boy a wave. Before returning to their work, others gazed at the newcomers with interest. The boy gestured to the four ninja while picking the girl up once more. He strode swiftly to the house after stepping through the small opening. The ninja followed warily, fascinated by the whole thing. Once they were through, the hole closed back up, preventing them from seeing the forest behind them. Blurred images were swimming in a hazy whiteness instead. When Kyuubi said, cool, Naruto grinned. The ninja kicked off their shoes as they entered the house and followed the boy into a tiny room where he placed the girl on a mat and wrapped her in a blanket. He took out a small drawstring bag from a drawer in the corner. He took out a tiny black pill and threw it into the girl's mouth. With a gentle stroke of her hair, the boy whispered, here you go, Kaya. That should ease the pain. Sakura, who could feel the intense connection between the two, arched her brows in laughter. The boy gestured them to a closed door as they slipped out in silence. With a fluid motion, he opened it, revealing 3 more individuals, all dressed similarly to the boy and girl. A girl and 2 boys were present. When the group entered the room, their faces lit up with interest and surprise as they looked up. Sitting at the head of the table, the boy gazed at each person in turn. So, what's with them? One of the boys asked, gesturing toward the ninja. Raising his eyebrows, he looked for an explanation on the boy's face. The girl gave a headshake. I hope you haven't done anything rash by bringing them here. The first boy grinned crookedly and said, I haven't done anything wrong. They will help us in our quest. The 3's amused eyes sparkled. The oldest looking boy laughed and folded his arms across his chest, asking, what on earth are you talking about, Hiraku? The 4 extremely perplexed ninja were pointed at by the boy, Hiraku. Hiraku exclaimed, they are the prophecy, with a hint of triumph in his eyes. The 3 turned their attention to the shinobi and gave them a doubtful look. After Sakura gave him a head slap, Naruto grinned and exclaimed, yo? Sasuke shook his head, clearly irritated by the knuckle-headed ninja. Dobi, was his mumble. With his eyes flashing red for a moment before returning to their sapphire blue hue, Naruto turned to glare at him. As he glared into Sasuke's face, he said, you want to try that again, Teme? Sasuke grinned. Sure. D-O-B-E, Dobi, he said, raising his voice as he spoke. He fell to the ground as Naruto leapt. The 2 began to wrestle, slamming into furniture and walls. In an attempt to break up the fight between the 2 boys, Sakura joined in. Now completely embarrassed by his students, Kakashi buried his face in his hands. With an apologetic smile, he approached the ball where the 3 were fighting. He reached in and grabbed Sasuke and Naruto, keeping them arms width apart. Still attempting to get a piece of each other, the two attempted to reach each other across the gate. Sakura cuffed both boys in the head after pulling herself off the ground. A terrible headache was growing as Hiraku slapped his forehead. He hurried to his feet and paced the table. He looked directly into the eyes of all the teenagers seated at the table and asked, "Do you remember the prophecy?" When he failed to receive a response, he sighed. When the war reaches its climax, 4 brave, but strange, warriors will arrive from the depths of the Forbidden Well. Though they look weak and ignorant, I'm sure they are really strong and courageous, and will lead the good out of this time of pain and blood shed. One boy leapt to his feet with skill and walked confidently to where Hiraku was waiting. He gave Hiraku a glare that was direct. The older boy smiled after a moment of silence and expectation. He turned back to the other smiling teenagers and laughed, saying, "I believe you, Hiraku. They might not look like much yet, but I'm sure they will show much strength in the heat of battle." Hiraku grinned as well, feeling very pleased with himself. He relaxed and sat down beside the girl. The boy said, "First matter of business, what happened to Kaya?" "While we were patrolling, one of the Muromachi warriors jumped us. During the fight, he got around Kaya's defense and knocked her out. I trailed him all the way to Riado. I accidentally mistook him for the enemy," Hiraku said, his face turning icy, as he muttered. His chest was rubbed as he muttered, "Yeah, I'll say. You slammed into me like you were trying to ram right through me." Hiraku gave a weak smile. "Hey, it felt like I had run into a wall of bricks. Well, after that whole thing, I brought her back here, along with these guys. I overheard them talking about the ancient well, over by Koreana Forest," he said. The 3 looked at the 4 as their eyes widened in silent shock. Sakura shifted uneasily under their probing stares and gave a feeble smile in response. The oldest grinned back at her and approached them. He had piercing dark green eyes and light green hair, and he was around 17 years old. He was dressed similarly to the others, but his armor was, you guessed it, hazy black and covered his chest, knees, and shoulders. Similar to the others. Naruto said, "Seems to like green a lot." Kyuubi said, Yes, very much so." His voice was gentle and reassuring as he said, "My name is Ishiko, and I am the oldest member in the Kamakura 5. I know you probably don't understand much yet, but all will be explained shortly." He gestured for the 4 to take a seat as he turned back to face the 3 warriors who were waiting. Ishiko gave the girl on his left a nod. Alia cocked her head in recognition as she said, "This Alia, the second oldest in our organization. She's 16 and Kaya's older sister." Her blonde hair was flowing and wavy, reaching her shoulder blades. Her eyes were light red and seemed capable of tearing you to pieces with a single glance. She was dressed in capri style black pants and a slim fitting black shirt. She was strapped to her body in blood red armor, just like Ishiko. She responded with a slight smile, but said nothing. "Quiet, isn't she?" said Naruto. Kyuubi replied, yes indeed." Ishiko chuckled and said, "You've already met Hiraku, the 3rd oldest, who's your age?" Hiraku's light gray eyes gleamed as he smiled. To the boy seated to his right, Ishiko gestured. "And this is Masuru. He's 13, a little older than Kaya, and the 4th oldest. You'll have to meet her later," he replied. Masuru grinned. His eyes shone like coal, black and charcoal. His black hair was shaggy and nearly fell over his eyes. He was dressed in dark brown pants that matched the color of the forest floor and a dark blue shirt that resembled Sasuke's old shirt. His indigo armor was fastened to his body in the same manner as the others. "It's good to meet you all. I'm Kakashi, leader of this squad," said Kakashi. Naruto exclaimed, "Hey, I'm Naruto," with a foxy grin. Sakura laughed to herself as she said, or, also known as the number 1 hyper. Active knuckle. Headed ninja. "Hi, I'm Sakura." The blonde was now frowning. Sasuke merely gave a grunt. Glowering at the boy with the raven hair, Naruto rolled his eyes in exasperation and muttered, "That's Sasuke. Don't expect him to talk much." Ishiko turned to face Kakashi and nodded. "I guess we have a lot of explaining to do," he replied. Kakashi grinned. The Junin answered, "That would be helpful." Ishiko sighed and nodded, as though it would hurt. It was going to be, in a sense. But if they intend to save us all, they must know. Ishiko began. It all began 1,000 years ago, when this horrible war started. Sakura's shocked eyes grew wide. Over 1,000 years of conflict? How awful. There were 2 major clans in Japan at the time, the Kamakura clan and the Muromachi clan. They were both led by mighty and powerful men, feared by all. The Kamakura's leader was Taisho and the Muramachi's leader was Showa. Showa and Taisho were good friends and got together often, to discuss clan matters and to play their favorite game, Meiji. One day, while they were in the middle of a game, Showa announced to Taisho that he had been having these ideas of world conquest. He had dreamt that if the Kamakura clan and the Muramachi clan united, that they could take over the world, and be tyrants. Taisho was appalled and vowed that he would never join with him for such dastardly plans. Showa swore to Taisho that he would not carry out with the plan as long as the truce between the two clans remained. Taisho agreed and left. But what he didn't know was that Showa was lying through his teeth. He was going to have world conquest, and he would smite anyone that stood in his way. Ishiko explained, pain beginning to draw in his eyes. Naruto gave Ishiko a supportive nod as the ninja leaned forward in anticipation. Taisho was traveling to the northern part of Japan, going to a meeting with a smaller clan's leader to ask for an alliance. He felt that Showa wasn't completely over his plans, and he was preparing for the worst. When they were only 2 days from their destination, Showa and a squad of his most elite warriors snuck up on their unsuspecting camp. Showa planned to forcibly convince Taisho to join him or suffer the consequences. For he had Taisho's weakness, cradled in his arms. Taisho's only son, Azuki, was Showa's way to have Kamakura's leader in his grasp. He had mercilessly slain Taisho's wife to get to him, and was prepared to do anything to accomplish this mission's goal. Silently, he killed off every guard before making his way to Taisho's tent. By this time, Taisho had awakened, and was waiting for Showa to strike. When Showa finally appeared, Taisho readied to spring, but stopped short when he saw Azuki firmly in Showa's clutches. Taisho knew that this meant his wife was dead, and he was filled with rage, a rage he had never felt before. He swiped his son away, carefully resting him on the ground. He fought Showa with all he had, but it wasn't enough. Showa had managed to find an edo, a fruit that if eaten, puts you in terrible pain for 3 days. And if you survive it, then you become immortal. Showa was now out of Taisho's grasp, and they both knew it. So, with Taisho's last ounce of strength, he gave his son the rest of his spirit, with a technique pasted down from their ancestors. This would make him immortal. Then he transported him away, to his sister in a faraway land. Attached to him was a note, shakily written, giving his sister instructions on what to do. And with that last task done, Taisho, the great leader, perished at the hands of Showa. Feeling so victorious with his win, Showa forgot completely about the baby and didn't give him much thought. He killed off the rest of the Kamakura clan, weak without a leader, and went on to make his army thrive. Years after Taisho's demise, Showa traveled to a sacred temple on the eastern coast. Here, all answers for his questions lie. In an underground cavern, he stole information that would ensure him world domination, but to do so, he would have to wait 1,000 years, for the planets to align. Once that happened, he would be capable of unleashing a great ghost army, one that was almost indestructible. Only then would he be unstoppable, Ishiko continued, his voice grave. The table was silent, with everyone lost in their own thoughts. With complete ignorance, Naruto said, I don't get what this has to do with why we're here. Kyuubi rolled his eyes and sighed. As Kyuubi waited for Naruto to finish, he asked, You are so stupid. 1,000 years ago is when this all happened. Now, try and remember, Ishiko said that the planets would align when... With a sudden realization, Naruto uttered, 1,000 years from when he went to the temple, which would be about, oh. Kyuubi gave a nod. Kyuubi remarked reflectively, Now, I wonder where a knucklehead like you comes into all of this. Yay, me too. Hey, exclaimed Naruto. Kyuubi laughed, finding Naruto's gullibility amusing. So, if Showa ate the Edo, making him immortal, he's still around now, leading this onslaught? Kakashi asked. Ishiko gave a serious nod. Sakura's head jerked up as she said, Unfortunately, yes. But he has changed his name, calling himself Tiger Star. The girl had heard the man say that name just before she died. Who was that girl anyway? He said, This is what happens to people when you cross Tiger Star. Her expression was unfocused. With an angry expression on his face, Hiraku explained, So as you see, it's almost time for his army to arise and take over this world, which if he succeeds, will affect your world in the long run. Now that they were in agreement, Naruto nodded. Naruto questioned, So, where do we come into this? What's this prophecy about? Ishiko grinned and responded, Azuki didn't last as long as Taisho had planned. He grew to about 30, and took lead of as many supporters he could find. He stormed Showa's camp, set on destroying the man that had killed his parents and his clan. But he underestimated the Ito's power. He figured that a sword is a sword, and that it would pierce through even an immortal man's chest, causing his to bleed to death. That was his greatest mistake, and it cost him his life. When he was going for a death blow, when the sword came into contact with Showa's chest, it bounced off like he was made of stone. Azuki was bewildered and terrified. Showa then pulled out his own sword, and used the technique he had acquired over the years. The name of this move, no one recalls, but it is one to be feared. For even though Azuki was immortal, with this skill, it sliced through his like he was paper. And with that, the world's only hope died at the hands of a tyrant. Or so they thought. Azuki hadn't left the world without having a wife or children. He had raised a son and a daughter, both aware of their past heritage. When news of their father's death reached them, the daughter and wife grieved, unlike his son, Heian, who plotted for his father's revenge. But he went about it a completely different way than Azuki had. He did not seek to become immortal, but he trained vigorously to become a skilled warrior. While his father gathered an army, he settled down with a wife and had 3 sons, who he taught everything he knew about combat and weaponry. And he died, telling his sons to pass on the information he had given them. So they did, for hundreds of years, until the line of sons ended, some many years ago. Ishiko went on to say. Speaking for the first time in a long time, Sasuke said, "So, if there are still some of the sons that know this, then why don't you contact them and ask them for help?" With a sigh, Ishiko combed through his hair. That's the problem. Tiger Star thought of all that, and killed off the sons and their families, along with all their secrets. But, one of the sons' wives managed to get away undetected. She eventually remarried, but to protect the new line of children she had, she did not tell them any of the information she had learned from her past husband. Instead, she wrote it all down and gave it to her oldest son, telling him never to open it, but to guard it closely. She demanded that he passed it down his line, until it got to her 100th grandson. When he asked her why, all she said was, "Teisho has foreseen. He came to me in a dream, and said the one that will end this horrible tragedy is one that will not be born for many a year away. And until then, the knowledge in that scroll must never be read, or it will be death to us all. But it is the prophecy. One will come, and he, along with his comrades, will save the world." And her son obeyed, passing it down until it got to the 99th grandson. But, unfortunately, he died before he could give it to his son. Ishiko said, sorrow creeping into his voice. The 4 ninja eagerly awaited the teen's completion, but he appeared to have halted. Naruto questioned, "So, then what? Who's the 100th grandson?" Ishiko looked straight up at Naruto. "Did you ever meet your parents, Naruto?" Ishiko inquired. Naruto's eyes darkened and he winced. "No," he muttered, his eyes displaying the anguish and sadness. Ishiko asked again, "They died when you were young?" Even though Naruto remained silent, they could tell he was hurt by the look on his face. Ishiko let out a sigh and nodded. Ishiko deadpanned, "The 100th grandson, is you, Naruto." Naruto's jaw fell and his eyes grew wide. Incredulous, Sakura, Kakashi, and even Sasuke gazed at Naruto. "Seriously? You must be kidding me. Are you certain? There might have been an error," Naruto sputtered, his face displaying shock. Ishiko gave a headshake. "There is no mistake. You and your friends are the prophecy, the ones we've been waiting for. But, the prophecy clearly states, that without you, the prophecy will fail, and the world will plunge into darkness," he said with solemnity. "Everyone always wanted me to simply vanish, but these people wanted me to appear." So Naruto collapsed back onto the ground and muttered, "Wow, to think someone's actually been waiting for me." The excitement in Naruto's feelings woke him up, and Kyuubi yawned. "Well, isn't that a nice turn in things, isn't it?" Naruto gave a nod of agreement. "You guys are our only hope at this point. We have an army at the ready, but without your help, we will surely lose," said Masuru. As the 4 absorbed all of this, new questions began to surface. After a brief pause, Kakashi said, "Well, I think I speak for all of us when I say, we'll help with whatever we can." Sasuke grunted, and Sakura and Naruto nodded in agreement. Hiraku grinned broadly, and Ishiko returned the acknowledgement with a nod. Masuru jumped up and said, "I know there is still much we need to explain, but now is not the time." "I agree. We need some time to grasp this much, especially Naruto. He can be a little slow," Kakashi said. Sakura glanced at the blonde and chuckled softly. The group laughed and made their way to the door after the shinobi simply scowled and muttered, "I'm not." They filed out into the long, silent corridor. Hiraku backed off toward Kaya's room, probably to see how she was doing. Masuru and Ishiko approached a small door that opened to reveal the house's exterior. Alia gestured for them to follow, and they followed her to a set of stairs that wound uphill. She walked to the top and indicated 4 doors, 2 on each side of the corridor. She said softly as she retreated down the stairs, "Those are the rooms where you'll be sleeping. The evening meal will be shortly." "What's with her?" Kakashi asked, glancing at Naruto. All Naruto could do was shrug and open the door to the nearest room. "Whoa!" he cried out. Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi looked into the room over his shoulder. It was quite spacious, about the size of the living room of a typical family. On the far side of the wall was a small window that provided a view of the warriors at work below. A heavy quilt was draped over a mat that was about 6 inches thick beneath the window. Naruto approached the 2 double doors on the far side. He opened them to reveal a room for weapons and clothing, as well as a shelf on which a sword could be hung. A chair stood facing inward in 3 of the corners. An ill-made couch covered in tattered cloth runs along one side of a wall. Between the couch and the wall was a big bookcase that held books on everything from history to fiction to instructions and advice on how to use weapons. Kakashi mumbled, "Wow." Sasuke and Sakura both nodded. They hurried away to inspect their own rooms. Naruto, who was exhausted, stumbled over to the mattress, fell heavily, and dozed off. Naruto was jolted out of La land by a voice calling his name and a soft prod. With a groggy opening of his eyes, he looked up to see Sakura kneeling beside his bed. She said, "Come on, get up. Food's done." With a groan, Naruto removed himself from the mattress. Naruto walked slowly down the stairs and into a spacious dining room, trailing Sakura. There were numerous tables with warriors eating what appeared to be stew at each one. Ishiko, Masuru, Alia, Hiraku, Sasuke, and Kakashi were seated at a table at the head of the room, laughing at an unspoken joke, when Sakura ushered him over. It was shocking to see that even Sasuke appeared to be having fun. Naruto dropped to the ground between Hiraku and Sakura. He picked up a wooden spoon and greeted the table of people with a weary smile. Silently, he ducked it into the bowl and started eating. Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi gazed at him in wonder. Naruto hoarsely swallowed his mouthful of warm both and said, "Wah?" Kakashi remarked incredulously, "You, not complaining about how there's not any ramen." Sakura remarked, "And, you're eating like a normal human being." Naruto simply shrugged back. Kyuubi went on, "They have a point, you are acting quite out of character." Naruto simply let out a sigh. "I don't know, I just feel that if I'm the fate of the world, I'll have to act a little more mature." Kyuubi laughed. He laughed and said, "A change that is long overdue." Naruto frowned. Ishiko said, "So, tell us about yourselves." The 4 looked at each other unsurely as they finished their meal. Mouthing, Naruto said, "What harm will it do?" Kakashi nodded and continued, "Where we come from is a place called Konoha, or the village hidden in the leaves. It's the main village in a nation called the Land of Fire, the biggest and most powerful of all the nations." With a questioning and doubtful look on his face, Hiraku interrupted, "Why is it called the Land of Fire? Is the land itself set aflame?" Amused, Kakashi laughed behind the mask. Sakura laughed at the boy's question and recited, "No, it's because it's oriented towards the element of fire, and the weather is usually warmer and hotter than the surrounding countries." Although Hiraku nodded, there were still signs of perplexity on his face. Naruto repositioned his headband as he spoke. Each country has its own warriors, shinobi or kunoichi, which are words for male and female ninja. To symbolize their status, they wear headbands with their country's emblem on them. Sakura grinned proudly as she stated, "There are different kinds of ninja, ranging from trackers to assassins, or to medics, like myself. There are 3 different attacks a ninja uses: ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu. Taijutsu is the use of marital arts, or hand-to-hand combat. Genjutsu is the use of illusions to confuse the enemy and leave an opening for the death blow. Lastly, ninjutsu is where a ninja uses chakra to create techniques, or jutsu, to take down an enemy. There can vary from creating clones of yourself or summoning up animals that you signed a contract with," Sasuke said with a smile. "In each main hidden village, there is one top ninja, the best of the best that lead the village, called a kage, the beginning suffix changing with each narshin. Our current leader, known as the Hokage, is a woman named Tsunade," Kakashi said. Naruto made a face as he recalled the day Tsunade appeared, saying, "She's really strong and sorta old, but you can't tell from just looking at her. She uses a technique to make herself look younger." Men initially flocked from all directions, practically swooning over the youthful appearing Kunoichi. However, they soon discovered the truth, that she was, in fact, 50 years old. Young shinobi stopped visiting, now only coming for business rather than pleasure. Naruto concluded with a flourish, and I'm going to become her successor one day. I will be the next Hokage. After giving the four ninja a blank look, Hiraku, Ishiko, Alia, and Masuru started laughing. Naruto questioned, What's so funny? That's impossible. Creating clones of yourself? Shooting fireballs? Doing all of this with an aura from your bodies called chakra? Hiraku chuckled. With his arms folded and a frown deepening on his face, Naruto muttered, It's chakra. Ishiko took deep breaths to calm himself, but the smile never entirely disappeared from his face. I apologize for our behavior, but seriously, the real story would be great. I mean, you actually expect us to believe that people like yourselves are running around with that type of power daily? He said, his tone cracking with laughter. The four, now nearly crying, opened their mouths to cackle again. When Naruto suddenly got to his feet, the laughter stopped. His face was tough and resolute. When he looked at Sasuke, the boy with the raven hair nodded in comprehension. He got up as well and said, Follow us. The four of them scrambled after the two shinobi, still laughing. They moved away from the warriors' activities to the farthest corner of the isolated area. Sasuke continued to walk alongside Naruto as he motioned for the four to stop. Sakura and Kakashi skidded to a halt as they ran up behind. Ishiko approached Kakashi and stood beside him. He looked at the blonde and whispered, What's up with Naruto? He seems pissed off all of a sudden. The boy was seen standing by himself with his eyes closed, giving the performance his all. You just told him that his dream is a myth. I could have told you he wasn't going to take it lightly. Kakashi responded. Curious, Ishiko looked back at the teenager. He muttered, I still don't believe it. Nevertheless, he watched with excitement, gazing at the two shinobi who were silent. With smirks on their faces, Naruto and Sasuke turned to face one another. For a while, the two stood silently, adjusting each other's senses. When Sasuke's eyes opened, he quickly made a series of hand seals. His speed astounded the four, and their eyes widened with curiosity. Kaden! Ryuka no Jutsu! Sasuke yelled as he finished his final seal and leapt into the air. A huge fire dragon erupted from the boy's mouth, causing pain to the still motionless blonde. The four's eyes shifted from astonishment to terror. It was going straight for their new friend, something they had never seen before. Suijin Heki! Naruto cried back as his hands whipped through a set of his own hand seals just as the dragon was about to strike. A wall of water appeared in front of the blonde, protecting him from the fiery dragon's fury. Sasuke had improvised, not anticipating that the dragon would actually hit its target, but the stream of fire vanished upon contact. 3 enormous shuriken appeared through the water wall and spun in Naruto's direction. He leapt into the air after deftly dodging out of the way. One pursued him, aiming for his head. A shuriken clone, What a genin year that is. Naruto created his famous cross seal while grinning with complete assurance. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A clone clutched his arm and hurled him out of the shuriken's path as it materialized in a puff of smoke. The clone was scattered when the projectile struck it. Hiraku jumped back in shock and fear as Naruto landed next to him. Ishiko, who was obviously shaken by the boy's performance, muttered, So, what you said was all true? As they allowed the scene that had just unfolded in front of them to sink in, the other three also took a step back, feeling odd, curious, and a little afraid. In response, Kakashi said, Every word. Masuru gave an incredulous shake of his head. His words were incredible. With a contented grin on his face, Sasuke walked up to the group. Unaware that she had been holding her breath, Sakura let out a breath. I assumed the two would exploit the circumstance and attempt to kill. I'm glad I was mistaken. Is that all you two know? Hiraku inquired, his eyes clouded with wonder and admiration. Then, with his usual silly smile, Naruto replied, Hell no, we know way more than that. You should see us when we really want to kill somebody. Ishiko retreated to the house after saying, Good. I'm sure your powers will be quite helpful in the future battles. Now, for some rest. We have a big day tomorrow. He was followed by the others, with Sasuke and Naruto trailing behind. Sasuke remarked, You've learned some new tricks while I was gone. He was astonished that the blonde had mastered an element that was not his forte and was genuinely shocked by his comrade's strength. Before he could even touch a scroll on another element, he had been ordered to work on his own natural elements. Therefore, the Dobi is superior to me in some ways. Sasuke's eyes narrowed a little, obviously envious that his opponent had gained more knowledge during his 4-year absence. With a nod, Naruto said, "So have you." The two continued to walk in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Everyone withdrew to their rooms due to the late hour, eager for a restful night's sleep and the solitude necessary to process all of the new information that had been presented to them that day. Naruto lay down on his cot and gazed at the ceiling, lost in thought, thanks to the sleep he had gotten earlier that day. The dream of Sakura. Sakura squatted on a low tree limb and gazed at a girl's back. Her dark gray eyes searched the trees around the clearing where she stood, while her blonde hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. Gazing at her comrade, Sakura wondered, what's she doing here? Men wearing black jumpsuits with flowing red ribbons tied around their waists appeared out of nowhere. Sakura cried out in fear, "Wait, I've seen them before. I've seen all of this before. This is my dream, from a while ago." At the thought, just like the last time, the men leapt. To Sakura's distress, the scenes, including the conclusion, repeated exactly as they had in her previous dream. Sakura attempted to move as she watched the arrow fly in an attempt to stop her friend from dying. She was unable to move, though, because her feet were planted. She opened her mouth to respond to the warning, but nothing came out. As her new friend died in front of her, she watched in silent horror. Tears threatened to spill out. A dark voice whispered, "No matter how hard you try, you cannot change the future." Sakura gasped because the voice sounded terrifying, horrible, and malevolent. Fortunately, the terrible image of the dying girl vanished from her thoughts, leaving her to drift indefinitely in the dark void. Cut off Sakura's dream. Sakura woke up, gasping for air and nearly toppling over her mattress. Warm tears streamed down her cheeks, falling quickly. As though searching for the man who had been haunting her dreams for the second time in 3 days, she cast a frantic glance around the room. This time, I recognized the girl's face. It was Alia. From between her lips came a gentle, yet agonized, whimper. Curling her knees to her chest, she waited for the first light of dawn in silence. There was a calm silence that only comes along so often, and Naruto was sleeping soundly. He was also having a great time, but it wasn't going to last. A splash. Naruto yelled, "What the fuck?" and leapt to his feet, kunai ready. He was soaked, and he wasn't pleased about it either. From behind came a dark, irritated voice that said, "Chill Dobi, we're not being attacked." The blonde's face and his guard dropped instantly. He spit out, "What the hell was that for, Teme?" and turned to face the teenager with the raven hair. Smirking, Sasuke waved a bucket of water that was now empty but was still dripping. He said plainly, "Time to wake up, warriors meeting." With a simple grunt in response, Naruto strode out the door while mumbling incoherently. Naruto hurried to the room where he had met all the others just a few days prior, taking the stairs 2 at a time. In the interim, nothing significant had occurred. No unexpected attacks, no forward motion, nothing. The shinobi was seeking action, and he had not even heard anything about the front line. "I'm hoping there will be some interest in this meeting." Naruto walked carefully and silently into the room, where he sat down beside Sakura and Hiraku. Sakura gave Hiraku a look of utter bewilderment while he chuckled quietly to himself. She was about to question her thoughts aloud when Naruto muttered, "Don't ask." Hiraku laughed uncontrollably, tears forming in the corners of his eyes as he saw the blonde's frustration. Naruto was about to say something sarcastic when he snarled, "Don't comment either." And then, with a smirk still on his face, Sasuke emerged. He sat calmly across from the blonde who was fuming and just kept grinning. Ishiko began, "Okay, now that we're all here, distractions and all," but was cut off by the knuckle-headed ninja's irate sigh. Sakura commanded silence with a quick but piercing blow to his head. With a hint of impatience on his face, Ishiko stated, "If we're all through, I'd like to continue." Sakura smiled back and nodded. Ishiko sighed in frustration. "As I was saying, the enemy has made a move on our lines with interest of pushing our borders back. As of now, they do not know where our hiding place resides, but if we allow them to reach any farther into our land, they will surely stumble across it." He started with a serious expression on his visage. The word, enemy, made Naruto's head twitch, and he now listened with curiosity and excitement. Ishiko added, looking at each warrior seated around the table in turn, "Now, although there haven't been many signs of an assault from Tiger Star and his troops, but I can assure you, expect the unexpected with him." With his arms securely folded across his chest, Hiraku questioned, "So, what do you propose we do?" With a gleam of excitement in his eyes, Masuru shot, "I say we jump, that way we can get them before they get us." After glaring at him, Ishiko turned back to the other members of the group. He does raise a good point, but the idea is rash and most likely wouldn't work. Tiger Star has more forces than we do, and you know it, Masuru. Taking all of our best warriors into a pointless battle would prove fatal to our side. Alia reasoned. Since they had arrived, the four shinobi had only heard her say a few words at a time, so they gazed at her in wonder. Ishiko leaned in and said, "All right. So, I suggest that Sasuke, Naruto, and Hiraku go." 3 boys gave him disbelieving looks. Sasuke calmly pointed to the 2 teenagers who were still alive and said, "With all due respect, Ishiko, but I am not weak. I will not say the same about those 2, but I think I am much more valuable than that." They both jumped to their feet and yelled, "Hey, I am not weak," together. There was a clear contest between the 3. Sasuke versus Naruto and Hiraku. Sakura and Kakashi stiffened, ready to break up what appeared to be an impending argument. Ishiko tried to calm the 3 steaming warriors by explaining, "No, that's not what I meant at all. I wasn't saying that any of you are weak by sending you on this mission, but you 3 are the quickest out of all of us, and speed will be the key to ensure success on this patrol." Hiraku slowly straightened up and sat down to ask, "So, the mission is basically checking out our borders, making sure no Muromachi are on our lands?" The oldest fighter gave a nod. "Technically, yes. I would rather avoid a fight for now, and the best way to do that is for someone to scope out the area without being detected. Hiraku, you are an obvious choice for that because speed is your best quality. Naruto and Sasuke, you say you're shinobi, specialized to do these things, so you 2 are also the apparent selection as well." Ishiko continued. Hiraku, Sasuke, and Naruto looked at each other and shrugged. "Sounds fine to me," was Naruto's casual response. Sasuke added the customary HMPH, and Hiraku nodded in agreement. Ishiko gave a satisfied smile. A tiny scroll came out of the leather pocket as he untied a strap on his upper shoulder. He whipped it open with a quick, fluid motion, exposing a map that resembled Kakashi's but was far more intricate. Masuru gestured toward a navy blue dot in the lower left corner of the frayed paper and said, "Our hideout is located here, in the southern section of Koreana Forest." Then he glanced at a red dot in the map's upper right corner. Masuru went on, gesturing to the line drawn in the middle of the map, "That is the Muromachi's current camp. But the hideout we want you to attack is over on our boundaries, right here." It was evident from the eraser marks around the stroke that both sides' borders had undergone numerous changes. Ishiko circled an area encircled by a thick wall of trees and said, "The camp is around the northern edge, and from what our lookout has said, there is about 30 men, plus a commander. I trust that you guys will be able to get in and out without being detected. That's how it appeared on the map, anyway." Naruto muttered, "Northern edge, 30 men. Don't get spotted, got it." Alia whispered, "If you want to get there by tomorrow, you have to pull out now." Ishiko gave a nod of agreement. With a faint smile, Masuru concluded, "So we need you to pack up and get out of here." After giving each other a nod, the 3 got up and hurried to their rooms. After a short while, standing at the gate separating their secret stronghold from the outside world were Naruto, Sasuke, and Hiraku. Hiraku nodded and returned to using the unknown aura after exchanging knowing looks. 1 man at a time could fit through the tiny hole that was made in the whirling wall. Hiraku ran quickly along the forest floor as the 3 filed out and the 2 shinobi fled to the trees. Their hiding place was hidden from the outside world as the flimsy entrance closed behind them. Naruto is italicized, Sasuke is bold, and Hiraku is underlined. "This is number 1 ninja, emo. Go ahead, I'm not emo. And so I'm not, gentlemen. Stop it before someone notices, or, in this case, hears us. HMPH. Alright, I'm in place. The same goes for me, good Naruto. Sasuke. Yes, indeed. Okay, come on in, chicken, ass hair. Yes, dead last hello." These 2, Naruto squatted in an old sycamore on a low branch. He could just make out Hiraku from where he stood, carefully hiding behind enormous bushes. The blonde couldn't see Sasuke from this vantage point, but he knew he was on another tree some 30 meters to his right. Their target, the base of the Muromachi clan, was a little further forward. It consisted solely of big red tents and was nothing special. They have little defense against an attack. However, they most likely didn't anticipate one. Naruto whispered into the microphone that was hovering over his chin, "Doesn't look like much." Hiraku whispered back, "Well, this isn't the whole army, only a small fraction of it really." Naruto looked around the enemy camp and nodded. Sasuke added, "Not much of a base, huh?" "No, not really. but they don't plan on staying here long. My guess is they're going to try and find our base. Hiraku responded. By the sound of his voice, Naruto could tell that a smug smile was spreading across his face. Sasuke said, "Good luck with that." Naruto scanned the area, looking for information. Numerous men were strolling around the area. They all wore shiny charcoal armor, and on their backs was a symbol in the shape of a red drop. The blood drop is the Muromachi clan's symbol. In former years, it used to be the moon, but after years of widespread bloodshed, Tiger Star decided to change it. That way, when people see his emblem, they will cower in fear. Hiraku said with a quiet voice. With a tone of shame and hatred permeating his voice, Hiraku continued, he calls himself the King of Blood. Most others just call him Red Moon, in combination of the moon and the blood drop. But no matter what you call him, it does not change what he is, or what he's doing. Naruto questioned, so, what exactly is he striving to do? We know he wants world domination, but he must have side goals to reach that. Our guess is he plans to wipe out the rest of the Kamakura clan. And probably force all the people in this land to become his slaves. Beyond that we have no idea though, Hiraku stated. Sasuke deduced, so, basically he's a tyrant. Naruto muttered in realization, no, he's not just a tyrant, he's a tyrant king. Sasuke inquired, what's the difference? Hiraku went on, yeah, aren't they like the same thing? When Naruto realized they couldn't see him, he shook his head. Almost, but there's a distinction. A tyrant only controls a small army and usually only looks for domination in maybe a city or a nation. Most of the time, they don't kill for the hell of it, only if someone resists. They aren't cold-blood killers, a better description would be, violent persuaders. Now, a tyrant king is different in a couple ways. Whereas a tyrant would look to take over just a small part, a tyrant king searches for something more, usually an entire continent, or even the whole world. They kill for fun, persuasion, and to show others just how powerful they really are. They're in every sense of the words cold-blooded killers. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want, and not even innocent civilians are safe with them around. Naruto explained wisely, all the while carefully studying the soldiers. The only sound coming from the line was the gentle buzz of the battery. After a minute of silence, Naruto asked, what? Hiraku muttered gravely, I never knew there was a difference, this changes a lot. Sasuke, who was clearly steaming, said, I just can't believe the Dobi knew something I didn't. When did you learn all this? With a smile on his face, Naruto proudly held something above the Uchiha. It was while Arrow, Sennin and I were out on our 3-year training journey. We were in the bird country and one of the governors had assassinated their ruler and was trying to gain his spot. He killed only a few people, but he was planning to blow up a busy square during a festival to show just how mighty he really was, said Naruto. I heard about that from Orochimaru. He was killed while he was setting up the bomb. Wasn't he defeated in front of the entire crowd? Sasuke inquired. Naruto said simply, yup. With genuine curiosity, Sasuke inquired, who beat the guy? I heard he was called Yellow Sparks, because he was almost as fast as the Yondaime himself. Naruto grinned. Naruto said, huh, didn't know they'd give me a nickname. He was clearly happy that the locals thought highly of him. Screaming, W. What, that was you? Sasuke made the microphone almost tremble. Holding his ear, Naruto waited for the high-pitched ringing to stop. Jealous? Naruto asked, savoring his pride as much as he could. Sasuke growled in response, PSH, of course not Dobi. However, the jealous tone was unmistakable. Guys? Hate to interrupt on your gloating and all, but we have a mission, Hiraku said. Naruto chose to focus on the current issue after nearly forgetting. Besides, he could always slap Sasuke with it afterwards. Then Sasuke said, okay, so now what? Hiraku recited, well, we're here to spy, gather information. The two shinobi responded simultaneously, got it. After an hour, in a whisper, Naruto said, this is boring. He was playing with a twig while comfortably stretched out on the branch. He was testing his ability to hold it for a minute while suspending it in midair. Although he also sounded agitated, Sasuke answered, we get the idea Dobi. You've said 1,000,000 times in the past half hour. But then, that was how he usually sounded. Lying on his side and sketching in the dust, Hiraku concurred, you're not the only one. Ishiko hasn't sent me on this lame mission since the acceptance test. At the camp, he looked languidly through the leaves. His expression changed abruptly from complete indifference to rage. With a quick hop to his knees, he returned to his position of observation. Naruto suppressed a yawn and asked, "What's up?" "That man," Hiraku said bluntly, gesturing to a recently disbanded group of fighters with a trembling finger. A large soldier stood in the middle, looking at each man in turn with a critical gaze. His black armor, like the others, was immaculately polished. On his back, the blood symbol was printed with boldness, looming over the glassy black surface like a sinister omen. He stood out among the sea of dark-colored warriors because a scarlet sash was tied tightly around his waist. His chin was lined with stubble, which gave him a rough appearance. It appeared as though the spirit had simply vanished from him because of the dark gray color of his eyes. He was frowning ferociously and didn't appear to be a man who even understood what a smile was. The most noticeable feature, however, was a deep gouge that ran from the top of his temple to the base of his nose across his right eye. "Who is he?" queried Sasuke. Hiraku remained silent. His eyes were practically screaming with intent to kill, and his body was trembling violently. "That is Commander Kyoto, and also the man that killed my mother." Before he could take another look at the threatening man surrounded by the warriors round, Naruto's eyes widened in shock. He certainly had the appearance of a man who would kill anyone, but appearances aren't always what they seem. Sasuke's voice called through the microphone, trying to calm the scowling brunette. "Hiraku, calm down. Think of the mission, we aren't supposed to get caught, remember?" It appeared as though the boy had not heard him for a brief moment, but the shaking subsided and his rapid breathing slowed down. Unaware that he had been holding in a breath, Naruto let it out. In the midst of the quiet, a loud voice exclaimed, "My fellow warriors, the time is now." The burly man had just started talking when the three of them returned their focus to the camp. He went on with a crazed smirk that showed his cracked, yellow teeth. "We will take over the Kamakura's land, storm their fortress and capture those rotten kids that have messed with our plans for so long." Naruto muttered in disgust, "Damn, has he ever heard of floss?" In response, Sasuke muttered, "Hasn't been invented yet." Naruto merely gave a grunt. Commander Kyoto yelled, "But, before that, we have a matter of business to attend to. Bring out the prisoners." After ducking into a nearby tent, a stubby soldier reappeared a short while later, pulling a woman with him. A small boy was clinging so tightly to the bottom of her dress that his knuckles were ghostly white, while she was chained by the hands with a thick rope. The woman was dragged to her knees by the warrior and forced to stand in front of the commander. With a gleam of murderous intent in his eyes, Kyoto smiled at her. Then he looked at the child who was shivering and lowered himself to his level. Tensing, the three in the bushes prepared to spring if necessary. Kyoto held his penetrating watch and looked the child in the eye. The young child whimpered after a few seconds of this and attempted to hide behind his mother's arm. The commander merely laughed at this. He jerked to his feet and turned back to the audience. He said simply to one of his fighters, "Seize the boy." A blonde with shoulder-length hair strode up and took the boy by the waist. He dragged him over his shoulder and returned him to the line of Muromachi fighters. The child called out, "Mommy," as tears ran down his cheeks and mixed with the dirt that was stuck to them. He started screaming and kicking, wailing for his mom. The man who was holding him growled and struck the boy in the head, saying, "Ah, shut up." He began to sob more intensely as a result. The mother spat, her eyes hardened. "Don't you hurt him." Commander Kyoto grinned, finding the display in front of him amusing. "Oh, don't you worry about your son. He will be a great addition to our army when he grows of age," he said. The mother turned to the gory man and whipped her head. She snarled ominously, "He would never join you. We are loyal to the Kamakura forces only." His amusement vanished as soon as the name of his arch-enemy was mentioned, and his expression changed to one of disgust. As hard as he could, he swung his hand out and slapped her across the face. A sharp thud sent the woman to the ground, and she let out a little cry of pain. A tiny trickle of blood escaped from her mouth as she slowly crawled back into her sitting position and glared at Kyoto directly. Kyoto strode directly in front of the woman and gave her a stern, inquisitive look. With his patience running low, he raged, "I will give you one last chance, seeing as I'm so merciful. You will join our army." A confident smirk appeared on the woman's face as she gave a brief laugh. She exhaled, "Never will I join you." Kyoto gave a frustrated huff. He yelled, "Then your choice shall seal your demise." He quickly pulled a big katana out of its sheath by his side. He let out a quick cry, but it was cut off at the woman's neck. The boy screamed, "Mom," once more, his eyes wide with fear. Hiraku shifted in his posture and fixed Naruto with his gaze. Although the two only looked at each other for a few seconds, the meaning behind their glances told everything. Hiraku drew his sword as Naruto produced a smoke bomb. Sasuke drew a kunai as well after realizing what they were going to do. Kyoto yelled, "Get ready to die," with anger etched on every feature of his face. "Mommy!" cried the child. Kyoto lowered his sword and swung it quickly in the direction of the woman's neck, right before it made contact. Boom! In front of Commander Kyoto, a cloud of smoke lifted. He jumped backwards, trying to get away from the unknown attack he had just witnessed, completely confused. 4 kunai, all aimed at the commander's vital points, sailed toward him through the smoke. He used his sword to block all but one of them, with the stray narrowly missing the main artery in his arm. The tiny blade sank deeply into the man's flesh after piercing his armor. Kyoto exclaims, "But how could it penetrate my armor?" as she firmly grasps the kunai and tries to pry it out. The blade had a chakra seal wrapped around its handle, which gave it the ability to cut through materials of any kind. He shot a glare back at the smoke column that rose into the sky. With an intense desire for vengeance, he yelled, "Who's there? Come out and show yourself, you coward." A minute or so later, with no response, the smoke cleared, exposing. Somewhere among the nearby trees, with a grunt, Naruto landed, and the woman tightened her hold on his jacket. With the boy nestled in his arms, Sasuke took a seat directly beside him. Sasuke and Naruto both freed the frightened prisoner. The boy cried, "Mom!" and rushed into his mother's arms. Breathing heavily, they held each other tightly. The woman smiled warmly at the two shinobi as she looked up at them. With genuine gratitude shining in her eyes, she whispered, thank you so much." Naruto smiled at the whimpering boy who was staring at them after they nodded in return. She said, "How can I ever repay you too?" Naruto began, "We don't want." "Wait, too," but stopped when he realized a crucial detail. Confused, the woman nodded. Naruto looked around the clearing, hoping to catch a glimpse of the brunette boy. His presence was nowhere to be seen. "Damn it, Hiraku!" exclaimed Naruto, exasperated. Leaping onto a nearby tree branch, he turned to face the clearing. He looked back at the three still on the ground before taking off. With chakra enhanced feet, Naruto hurriedly demanded, "Sasuke, get them somewhere safe." Sasuke yelled, "Leave some of those guys for me," after the blonde. Then he returned his attention to the issue. After laying the woman on his back, he took the young child in his arms. He turned back and smiled convincingly at the frightened woman. Before he took off across the forest floor, he said, "Hold on tight. You're in for a hell of a ride." Campsites in Muramachi. With his sword drawn and hatred radiating from him, Hiraku was visible as the smoke cleared. Kyoto grinned, surprised and angry at the same time. Throwing the blood-stained kunai into the dirt at his feet, he said, Hiraku. Just couldn't stand to see a boy's mother killed off?" Hiraku snarled, practically spitting the commander's name like poison. "Shut the hell up, Kyoto." Examining his fingernails as though they were truly fascinating, the commander sneered, "But you know, lucky for that one, she got away." Hiraku repeated, tensing his muscles and slipping into a stance, "I said shut up, damn it." Kyoto went for a low blow, saying, "Oh, if only you had this kind of strength when your mother was in this position. Maybe she might have survived." Hiraku roared, "Shut the fuck up," and sprang into action. With his sword firmly at his side, he dashed in the direction of the man in front of him. With a slight smile on his face, Kyoto simply stood motionless. The Kamakura warrior became even more enraged by this, and a battle cry tore from his lips. Kyoto thrashed outward just as the point of the sword appeared ready to strike. Hiraku was unarmed in a single, deft maneuver, his sword flying to the other side of the field. Hiraku threw out his fist, trying to strike his face while he was so close, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. Kyoto's hand shot upward, effortlessly deflecting the blow. Discouraged, Hiraku swung out his leg, but the commander's knee armor stopped him. Now Hiraku was entangled and no longer useful. Kyoto, unfortunately for him, still had an arm at his disposal. Kyoto, unable to block, stabbed him in the neck, severing the brunette's airway. It threw him to the ground, clutching at his chest as he struggled to breathe. Calmly, Kyoto picked up his sword from the ground and moved slowly toward the boy's attempted standing position. With a vicious grin, he held the blade's tip directly over the boy's heart. He laughed and said, "Say hello to your mother for me." He positioned himself to drive the sword all the way through the boy's body by thrusting his arm backward. Hiraku lowered it and squeezed his eyes shut, hoping for a swift and painless demise. The clearing echoed with the sound of metal on metal. To find out what had prevented the evil man from striking him to death, Hiraku dared to open his eyes slightly. He was completely taken aback by what he saw. The last person he expected to see was standing guard in front of him. With his sword in hand, the boy was now deftly slicing between the blades of the most gifted swordsman in the land. Furthermore, Hiraku was fairly certain that the warrior had never handled a sword before. With a broad, arrogant smile, Naruto grunted, "This was so not part of the plan." Kyoto stared in wonder at the blonde boy who was now obstructing his powerful blade. He wore an outfit he had never seen in these parts before and was slightly shorter than himself. It must be an alien. With an evil smirk lighting up his face for effect, Kyoto blurted, "Listen, Outlander, and listen well. I know you're not from these parts, but I am a figure to be feared. I am Kyoto Masamura, commander of Tiger Star's great army." With a small laugh, Naruto gripped the sword's hilt more tightly. The blonde confidently replied, "No need for an introduction, I know who you are." The warrior's expression briefly changed to one of bewilderment. Bewildered that the child in front of him was not scared or even slightly frightened, Kyoto asked, "Then, if you know who I am, why do you not run in fright?" The blonde Jinchuriki gave a little laugh at this. With a triumphant grin that spread like wildfire, Naruto shot back, "I've seen scarier things in my teeth." Kyoto frowned. Before wheeling backwards on the balls of his feet, he sneered, "You will pay for doubting my strength, little maggot." The soldier slashed his sword blindly as he ran at the teenager after they had gained some distance. Naruto vanished in an instant, just as the sword was ready to strike his chest. As he came to a halt, Kyoto staggered and looked wildly around the campsite for his opponent. Naruto's voice reverberated throughout the room, echoing from every nook and cranny, "You're too slow for me." The warriors looked around, trying to find the little boy. Any shinobi would know that the ninja was using chakra to make his voice sound better, but to the primitive fighters, the boy's rapid movements made him appear to be everywhere at once. "Come out here and show yourself, you coward," yelled Kyoto, his face displaying anger. He didn't want his men to think poorly of his abilities, and he was being humiliated in front of his entire unit. Naruto called again, but from a single location this time, saying, "Okay, I'll play your game." With his head stuffed deep in his pockets, he emerged from the shadows with composure. Kyoto was so upset that this young boy was behaving like he was a playmate in a wrestling match that he yelled, "Get ready, 'cause here I come." In order to increase his agility, he charged while holding his sword at an angle to the ground and lightly digging the tip into the ground. Determined to get a decent slice at the shinobi before he vanished with his incredible speed once more, he ran as fast as he could. He intended to give the boy a direct look when he looked up, but he stopped when he noticed that he wasn't there. From behind, a dark voice murmured, "Rule number 1, never take your eye off the enemy." He spun around and was struck by a fist that struck his face squarely in the side, causing him to fall to the ground. His eyes widened in shock, as though he had never seen the substance before, and blood started to drip from the corner of his mouth. As he flicked the tiny blood droplets onto the ground in front of him, Naruto grinned. Hiraku was waiting in the trees, so he turned on his heel and started to move away. As he attempted to stand again, Kyoto yelled after him, no one makes me bleed my own blood." After failing that, he took the next best step, which guaranteed the blonde nuisance's death. The commander yelled, "Get him," to his soldiers. The warriors shrugged and pulled out their weapons after a series of uncertain nods and looks. One of them yelled, "For Tiger Star, and everything he strives for," as a rallying cry. All 30 of them hurried over to the blonde shinobi after receiving a hearty cheer in return. Naruto cracked his knuckles in a quiet laugh. Before he ran to meet the wave of approaching warriors, he said, "This is going to be fun." As he leapt wildly over the tree branches, Sasuke kept saying to himself, "Shit, shit, shit, shit." The real battle now was finding it first, even though he had intended to go back to the battlefield and help his comrades. Feeling guilty for not thinking of it sooner, he muttered, "I knew I should have marked a trail." He heard a war cry made up of many people just as he was ready to give up and turn around. He grinned triumphantly and accelerated, fervently hoping it was the fight he sought. Naruto was fighting 10 or so warriors hand-to hand when the raven-haired shinobi suddenly appeared from the nearby trees. One of the soldiers who was going to swat the blonde's head clean off took a roundhouse kick from him. Sasuke gave the perplexed ninja a sly smile. He said simply, "You owe me," and then returned his attention to the group of men who were rapidly catching up to the newest arrival. After waking up from his stunned state, Naruto punched a warrior fighter in the face, knocking him back a few feet. He and his companion jumped away from the crowd of men gathered, coming back. Back. Naruto slid into a basic defensive stance and said, "How about I take the 20 on the left and you get the 10 right?" Unwilling to miss the opportunity to get some action, Sasuke retorted, PSH, as if. How about I get the 20, and you get the 10? Dividing the group equally, Naruto exclaimed, no way, 15 each? Knowing that it was the best he could get, Sasuke nodded. Commander Kyoto gave a disbelieving shake of his head. They were arguing about how many they would get, and they wanted the most, rather than trembling in terror. Compared to all the other soldiers he and his unit had met, these two stood out. Sasuke began to form the hand signals for one of his well-known techniques while Naruto engaged in more close combat. He raised his ring-shaped fingers to the outside of his mouth. He mentally exclaimed, Kaden, Goryuka no Jutsu, as a huge ball of fire burst from his mouth. It sped toward the fighters closest to him and sucked them into a raging whirlpool. 5 of them screamed in agony as they fell, and 5 more were shrewd enough to leap out of the flame ring. However, the 5 who were able to flee did not survive for long. Sasuke launched several shuriken, each of which struck its target and immediately killed them. Sasuke scowled. Most of the 15 soldiers he had to destroy had already been terminated. He was really disappointed because this was barely even a workout for him. As he was preoccupied with his thoughts, a rather large man silently ran up behind him, aiming his sword at the dead center of his back. Sasuke spun around with a drawn kunai, prepared for battle, when he finally realized someone was behind him, only to discover the warrior unconscious. A sly smile lit up Naruto's face as he stood directly beside him. He exclaimed with a smile as he hurried back into the chaos, looks like we're even, Sasuke tossed himself back into the battle as well, dismissing the small setback. After a short while, as she brushed himself off, Naruto threw the last of his 15 onto a heaping pile of unconscious bodies. He was in perfect condition except for a few cuts and scrapes and a few bruises. Sasuke had fewer cuts, but otherwise he was the same. Disbelief filled every part of Kyoto's face as he collapsed to his knees. Within minutes, his whole unit had been either killed or rendered unconscious. No one, not even an adult, had ever defeated his army before. He hadn't even considered calling for reinforcements yet, but these 2 teenagers had completed the task so fast. Looking at all the bodies scattered throughout the smoking campsite, Naruto remarked, you know Sasuke, you didn't have to kill all 15. Sasuke gave a shrug. He answered, less to deal with later. His eyes moved to the spot where Commander Kyoto was still kneeling, staring in awe. He turned to face him and nodded. Sasuke asked casually, what do we do with him, instead? With a, probably, Naruto replied, take him back to headquarters so he can be questioned. Sasuke gave a headshake. Sasuke rationally responded, no way. If he ever escaped, then he could tell Tiger Star where to find us, and that would be bad. After considering the novel concept, Naruto nodded in agreement. Naruto exclaimed, true. We could. Hey, he's gone. But realized the commander had run away before he could finish his sentence. He looked around in the hopes of catching a glimpse of the man who was running away, but he couldn't find him anywhere. When they acknowledged that he had vanished, Sasuke muttered, damn. With a sigh, Naruto expressed his obvious displeasure that the enemy had escaped. He kicked the ground, causing a dust storm to rise. The 2 boys were surrounded by a smooth voice that said, I am your opponent now. Naruto held out Hiriku's sword in a defensive form as Sasuke swiftly slid into a stance and drew a new kunai. A young girl who appeared to be around their age emerged from the trees. Her eyes were a rich emerald, and her brunette hair cascaded to the middle of her shoulder blades. She was dressed entirely in black, the arms and pants turning into fishnets as the material continued, just like every other warrior the 2 had encountered. She was staring out at the shinobi with a crimson-red bandana tied around her forehead, representing blood. 2 twin katana, both dark gray, were securely strapped to her back. The sun glinted deadly on the swords as she deftly slid the blades from their leather sheaths. Naruto stiffened, getting ready to strike. Sasuke stood next to him, staring at the girl with the brown hair with his mouth open. Naruto kicked the Uchiha in the shin and whispered, Sasuke, get over it. Regretfully, the teenager stood there seemingly in a trance and did not respond. Naruto rolled his eyes as he realized he would have to face her by himself and returned his focus to the enemy. The girl brandished her sword and commanded, come at me, foreigner. Naruto grinned. He answered, gladly, and then rushed in her direction at a normal pace, but one that was nearly invisible to the naked eye. The boy's speed clearly surprised the warrior, but it was short-lived. She easily blocked the approaching sword by swinging her arm out. Gritting his teeth, Naruto swung his foot out toward her legs in an attempt to remove them from beneath her. The girl dodged the low blow and leapt up in place. She said, "Too slow," and then danced off. There was no sign of fear in her face. Instead, her eyes were full of excitement. Unwilling to give up, Naruto struck her once more, this time aiming a punch at the side of her head. Instead of the intended cuff to the temple, she ducked and was only given a tip to the forehead. Naruto quickly decided that close combat was not the best course of action and jumped back, stopping by burying his hand along the ground. "Futen! Dai Kamaitachi!" he shouted, swinging the sword outwards while quickly forming a train of hand signals. The girl's eyes widened in shock as a huge whirlwind of air rushed towards her. She tried to block the attack by throwing up her sword, but it didn't work. The warrior is surrounded by a pocket of raging winds as the wind whips past. Her clothes and blades are torn apart by the air, reducing them to insignificant metal fragments that fall to the ground. The girl gasped and dropped to her knees. She looked up at the blonde shinobi, who was grinning triumphantly at the moment. Before collapsing to the ground, she muttered, "You were a worthy opponent. I played the game, but lost." With a sigh, Naruto knelt beside the soldier who was unconscious. He took her in his arms with care and strode to a tree on the edge of the forest. He placed the sword hilts at her feet and supported her against its trunk. The name was carved into the glossy wood. Naruto read to himself, "Kara." This was the name of the girl in the hilts, he realized. He noticed that Sasuke had been roused from his trance and was staring at the two with an odd expression in his eye when he turned to look behind him. He had a silly smile on his face. After observing Sasuke's actions, Naruto said slowly, yeah. Come on Sasuke, let's go get Hiraku." Sasuke remained motionless, as if he hadn't heard him at all. Naruto snapped his fingers in front of the raven-haired boy's face and repeated, "Yo, Sasuke." The teenager shook his head to get rid of any remnants of the hypnosis. Like manners, and his eyes returned to normal. He was obviously dazed and asked, "Huh? What happened? Did we win?" Naruto laughed. He smiled and said, "Yes Sasuke, we won. So we can go home now." Sasuke glanced at the men holding the female sword and then nodded quickly before disappearing into the forest. Naruto sighed when he was out of earshot. He muttered, "Looks like trouble." That look Sasuke was giving her can't be good. As he turned to face his former opponent before leaping into the woods himself. Walking through the narrow entrance, Naruto, Sasuke, and Hiraku entered the Kamakura's hiding place's front yard. Weapons and tools littered the yard, and the place was deserted. Except for one crucial element, the three would have been alarmed by this. Naruto's stomach rumbled and he replied, "Lunchtime." Both Sasuke and Hiraku, who were also hungry, nodded. They created quite a commotion as they ran through the building and rushed into the dining hall. After a group of warriors glanced in their direction and a few held up their cups to greet them, they resumed their mealtime chatter. The trio charged at the spread of food in front of them, leaping into their seats at the table. Everyone was taken aback. Only a moment before, they had been there, gorging themselves on food as though tomorrow didn't exist. Sakura joyfully cried, "Sasuke, Naruto, Hiraku, you're back." Naruto paused his meal to speak to the other diners, nodding. Naruto grinned and said, "Yeah, just now. We kind of figured it was lunch because we noticed there wasn't anyone on the training grounds." Even Alia was grinning at the table of warriors, who were all grinning back. Picking up his cup, Ishiko asked, "So, did the mission go well?" Unsure of what to say, Naruto answered, "Well, depends on how you look at it." Ishiko slammed the cup back on the table as he froze. The loud clatter of the metal caught the attention of tables nearby. With a look of fear on his face, he asked firmly, "What do you mean?" Naruto let out a sigh. "Okay. Let's see. Well, we were there for a really long time watching the camp, not much interesting stuff goes on there. But after hour 6 of our little stakeout, a commander showed up, Commander Kyoto." Naruto continued. Hiraku's fists were clenched so tightly that they turned white, and the 4 Kamakura warriors gasped. Ishiko whispered, "Commander Kyoto." Should have known he'd be leading a raid party. Both Naruto and Sasuke gave the teenager a curious glance. "You've met him before? I mean, we know Hiraku has, but..." Sasuke interrupted before the team next to him could take it personally. Ishiko gave a grim nod. Commander Kyoto, or also known as the Merchant of Death. He's one of Tiger Star's most loyal soldiers, and apparently was promoted to commander not so long ago. We've met with him more than once before. The last time we saw him, he was captain, not commander, and it was when we cut off one of their army's supply ships, he said. He's a very skilled swordsman, one of the top 10 in the land. And he's a ruthless killer. He'll slaughter anyone that dares to get in his way. Masuru said with a grave expression. Naruto laughed, a smile spreading across his face in remembrance. Well, he isn't that good, seeing as I beat him. With the exception of Sasuke and Hiraku, everyone gazed in wonder at Naruto. With each scream, Masuru's voice rose. You beat Kyoto? He exclaimed. Uncertain of the direction of this, Naruto reluctantly nodded. Ishiko let out a sigh while maintaining a detached gaze. For once, rather than looking bored, Alia asked, Have you ever touched a sword before? The warriors stared at the blonde in disbelief as he shook his head, his smile widening. Kyoto saw you? Ishiko said in a low voice. Everyone's faces changed from astonished to perplexed as they turned to face the boy. Naruto replied, fear beginning to cast a shadow over his face. Yeah, what's wrong with that? Kyuubi smirked as he sang, oh, looks like the kid screwed up big time. Naruto frowned. Naruto swore and started to pace, saying, I don't even know what I did wrong. I did it to save a life. What could be the problem with that? Kyuubi sighed, you've always been too soft, kid. Ishiko's breathing started to quicken as he answered, what's wrong, is that Kyoto will report you to Tiger Star, meaning our enemy will know we have the one thing that can stop him, you. With everyone lost in their own thoughts, the table fell silent. Kakashi questioned, does he know about all of us? Ishiko gave a shrug. Ishiko whispered, staring at the blonde, he might not. He could have figured Sasuke was just a new recruit. That's what I hope anyway. Ishiko said sharply, his face taking on a disgruntled look, why did you show yourself? I told you, this was a mission where you watch and learn. Naruto glanced at Hiraku, who was looking at the ground with a look of guilt on his face. Naruto let out a sigh. Kyoto was about to kill a mother while her son was watching. I couldn't let it happen, so I intervened. It was completely my idea. I'm sorry I disobeyed. Whispered Naruto. Hiraku looked at the blonde as his head snapped up. Naruto gave him a quick look and a feeble smile. Hiraku merely watched in bewilderment. Ishiko let out a frustrated sigh. Your actions could cost us a great price in the future. As punishment, you will not be able to go on patrol tomorrow with the rest of us. You will remain here, watch over the soldiers, and take care of Kaya. Ishiko said. Although Naruto's heart ached, he was able to conceal it well. He nodded back, his head held high. Naruto answered with a hint of depression in his voice, of course, Ishiko. Ishiko gave a weak smile and nodded back. Everyone makes mistakes. We'll just have to be more careful around the enemy now. If Kyoto does tell Tiger Star that the prophecy is true, his first objective is to destroy all of you. Naruto is a little more important in the prophecy's foretelling, but that doesn't mean we can't do this without all of you. Ishiko responded with a reassuring grin. What exactly is our part in this prophecy? We've been here for about a week, and we haven't been told very many details. Kakashi responded. Ishiko acknowledged with a nod. When all is lost, bloody and hopeless, one being will rise from the ashes. With powers unseen and might beyond compare, these four will vanquish the darkness, once and for all. But everything will be for nothing if the 100th child is missing. For the light cannot destroy the darkness without the sun, Ishiko said. Sakura said, that doesn't exactly rhyme. Hiraku let out a sigh. Masuru clarified, it doesn't have to. It's the meaning behind the words that's important. Sakura lowered her head in comprehension. Puzzled, Naruto questioned, so, what can we do that you guys can't? Sasuke whispered, maybe it's the fact that we can use chakra and they can't, Dobi. Naruto gave his comrade a dagger. Like glare. The blonde asked, I know that, but I mean, is there a certain technique we have to learn? Ishiko gave a head shake. Not we, you. Only you can fully destroy him. If Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi fought Tiger Star, they could wound him, maybe, but he would not die. Remember, only the light can vanquish the darkness, Ishiko responded. Yeah, but there are a million different jutsus, not to mention the fact of chakra power, the element type, and the rank. There's a lot that you have to put into this stuff, you know. You can't just wave your hand and create fire or something. Naruto argued. Ishiko gave a shrug. Ishiko answered, well, it's said that one of you has the technique. Yeah, but who? Sakura asked, expressing the query that was on everyone's mind. The prophecy stats, the one that has done wrong, but will show to be true to the end. Only that person has the answer, said Masuru. Deep in contemplation, the shinobi furrowed their brows. Sakura's head jerked up in realization after a few moments. An excited pink-haired girl cried out, Sasuke, he's done wrong, but he's shown to be true so far. Both Kakashi and Naruto grinned and agreed with the Chunin. When Sasuke realized that everyone was looking at him, he spluttered, "But I don't know a move that can defeat darkness." Naruto's face lit up with pride as he replied, "It said the person brought it. Remember, you stole that scroll? That has to be it. The technique is inside the forbidden scroll." The boy with the raven hair caught the attention of the three shinobi. Sasuke let out a sigh. He tossed the white scroll into his comrade's eager hands and said, "Fine, here." In one smooth motion, Naruto slid it open and started reading. Over his shoulder, Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi looked in an attempt to see what was written on the forbidden scroll. "What the hell?" said Sasuke. "Seriously?" Sakura concurred. Naruto looked up at both of them. "What?" he inquired. Sasuke answered, "You can't even read it." Naruto gazed at him bewildered. Naruto replied, returning his focus to the parchment he was holding, "I can." Naruto recited, seemingly reading the first line, "The dark will thrive, grow, and spread. And only the light can put it back in its place." Kakashi remarked, "But how can you understand it? It's gibberish." Naruto gave a shrug. As she continued reading the scroll, the blonde responded, "It looks like any other form of writing I've seen before. It's amazing, really. It speaks of a jutsu that destroys evil and the darkness that surrounds it. And they use hand seals I've never even heard of before," said Naruto. "Well, tomorrow, while we're on patrol, it's your duty to begin to learn this jutsu," Ishiko replied. Naruto gave a nod. Ishiko added, withdrawing to his room, "Now, everyone get some sleep. We all have a busy day tomorrow." Panting, Naruto lay in the soft grass. The correct chakra exertion was something else entirely, even though he had finally mastered the hand signs. The jutsu wouldn't react, no matter how much or how little. Naruto let out a frustrated scream, how am I supposed to learn this?" He let out a frustrated sigh. Gazing at the flimsy scroll next to him, Naruto added to himself, "And it's not like I can ask for help if I'm the only one that can read it." From the opposite end of the clearing, he heard what sounded like water splashing. Now that he was familiar with that sound, he got up from the floor. He ran to meet his returning comrades at the far end of the clearing. The place had been dull without anyone to practice against, and they had been out on patrol for hours. He walked up to the group and said, "Hey guys, what took you so long?" With grins on their faces, Sakura and Sasuke approached him. Sasuke yelled, "Aw man Naruto, you missed a great run." Strangely, the boy with the raven hair had become much happier since they arrived, but the change was now obvious. Naruto frowned. Then Naruto complained, "Don't remind me." Sasuke laughed. Sasuke commented, "Sorry, forgot. But hey, you didn't have to take the blame for Hiraku, you know." Naruto let out a sigh. He answered, "I know, but that's what friends do, right?" Sakura and Sasuke both nodded in agreement. With genuine curiosity, Naruto questioned, "So anyway, anything interesting happen?" "Well, it was pretty boring at first, so Hiraku, Sakura, Masuru, and I started up a mock battle. You would have loved it. But then, the biggest surprise stumbled across our borders." Sasuke clarified. Feeling a little depressed about being excluded, Naruto gave a half-hearted smile. Picking himself up, Naruto asked, "What was it?" Sasuke gestured back at the other members of the group. To which Sasuke replied, "Go look for yourself." After giving the teenager a nod, Naruto approached the other people. He smirked as he moved to stand in front of Ishiko. In a single sentence, he said, "Hey Ishiko, Alia, Hiraku, Kakashi, Masuru." Everyone smiled back at the blonde. Ishiko asked, "Hey Naruto, how was everything while we were away?" "Okay." Kaya woke up, and she's doing fine. Still a little pain in the lower back, but I promised that Sakura would look at it once she got back. I had the warriors practice some hand combat while you were gone. I didn't mean to take over, but some of them wouldn't last a second if they were unarmed," Naruto stated, taking a deep breath. Ishiko gave a sympathetic nod, and Naruto went on. "And after all of the above was finished, I got started on that jutsu. It's called Heaven's Light. I got the hand signs down, but I just can't get the right amount of chakra into it. I was hoping you could help me, Kakashi Sensei," Naruto concluded, with a hopeful expression on his face. Kakashi replied with his one-eyed grin, "Done." The features of Kyuubi were visible in every fold of Naruto's smile. Ishiko declared, "Good. Now, we have some very important matters to discuss." "Oh yeah. I hear you guys found some surprising information. What's it about?" "A secret map of Tiger Star's hideout?" With sparkling eyes, Naruto inquired. Ishiko laughed. Masuru, who had charcoal eyes, retreated toward the white swimming wall after the leader gave him a nod. After a few seconds, he came back. 2 little boys were right behind him. Ishiko put a hand on each boy's shoulder and explained, "These 2 are from the Muromachi training center. They escaped only a few days ago, and they seek to join our side. They have valuable information about Tiger Star and his forces. Inside information." Naruto's eyes pierced the 2 as he studied them. They both stared back, one curiously, the other uncertainly. Naruto slowly lowered himself to eye level with the kids and asked, "How much inside information could regular trainees get? I mean, if they give them the whole walkthrough, then this Tiger Star figure must be a real moron." He gave them both a gentle smile. The gray-haired boy's nervousness vanished instantly, and he smiled back. The inquisitive one also grinned and gave a timid wave. Naruto's smile expanded until it took over his face. Ishiko grinned, a broad smile of triumph spreading across his face. "These 2 are Tiger Star's sons." Naruto's eyes were hard as he glared through the darkness at the thin white walls. He was sitting on the roof of the Kamakura hideout, thinking about what had happened that afternoon. The boy's eye flickered from pools of cerulean to crimson puddles that burned at the thought of it. Rewind with a stealthy leap onto a mat that encircled the table, Naruto questioned, "So, what's this matter we need to discuss?" The 2 young children sat closely behind Ishiko, who sat at the head of the table. The boy with the forest hair answered, "We need to discuss these warriors' accommodations." With a casual demeanor similar to Sasuke's, Masuru proposed, "I say we throw them out. They could be spies for all we know." "That's no way to welcome them," exclaimed Kaya, who had just become a member of the entire group. With a tone of boredom, Masuru replied, "Who cares?" A big bump grew as Kaya calmly cuffed the black-eyed boy in the back of the head. She muttered, her eye twitching, "Baka." Sakura grinned. "She and I will get along just fine, I believe." Ishiko redirected the conversation by saying, "Right, anyway, for starters, they'll need a room. Alia, are there any vacant spaces?" Alia gave a nod. The girl pointed to the blonde shinobi and said, "Only one, they'll need to share. It's across the hall from his room." In response, Naruto bounded, "I have a name you know." Alia gave him a blank stare. Alia said, "And your point is?" Naruto rolled his eyes and sighed. Ishiko scowled at the 2 until they both fell silent and turned back to the task at hand. "Okay, the quarters are solved, now comes the biggest factor, their training. I would put them with the troops, but they're too young at the time. So I have no choice but to assign them to 2 of us," Ishiko said. Naruto's head immediately twitched, and he listened with fresh curiosity. He had a side objective after becoming Chunin, which was to play for his own team before he became Hokage. He aimed to guide students in the direction of strength, skill, and intelligence while teaching them about the real way of the ninja. Ishiko increased the tension in the room by adding, "Now, I have thought long and hard about this." Leaning forward, Naruto fervently hoped that he would be paired with one of the smaller soldiers. "The trainers for Daisuke and Ryuchi will be Hiraku and Sasuke. To reward them for their last mission," Ishiko said. Naruto crumpled, as though he had no bones to support his body, while the boys swelled with pride. Hiraku's face lit up with guilt as he glanced at the blonde out of the corner of his eye. Ishiko pointed to each of the boys and called their names, saying, "Sasuke, you will take on Ryuchi, and Hiraku will take on Daisuke." Naruto's disappointment was evident in his voice as he said, "Hold on. I went on that mission too." "Yes, Naruto, but I figured that Daisuke and Ryuchi will need to learn to follow orders, and they need to be taught by those that also follow instructions." And seeing what happened on that last mission, Ishiko clarified, continuing at the conclusion. With his disappointment soon turning to rage, Naruto protested, "But I was already punished for that. I wanted you to stay behind and practice that technique," Ishiko replied. The blonde jumped up and shouted, "You said my penalty would be to watch Kaya and the troops." "Yes, originally that was the plan. But then you actually had a reason to stay behind. I don't think that really was an act to teach you discipline," Ishiko yelled in a loud voice. With his eyes flashing blood red, Naruto screamed, "Hey! We did that mission great, and we intercepted a murder. What the F is wrong with that?" Ishiko yelled, "You aren't responsible enough to take care of yourself, much less another life," as he approached the ranting blonde. "I'm very reliable. I've completed S-rank missions on my own, and they've always been successful. In addition, I followed the mission instructions exactly," Naruto shot back, his rage at the breaking point. He could sense the malevolent intent approaching him like a shadow. Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi looked at each other, all of them aware that the blonde's patience was wearing thin. I told you specifically that this was a watch and learn mission. But what do? You jump out in the open and announce your arrival to the enemy with a bang. You have yet to prove to me that you're responsible or dependable. And until you can, don't expect to be leaving these grounds. I don't need you screwing up everything we've worked so hard for, Ishiko said with a low blow. Naruto's eyes turned from a dazzling blue to the vivid red of the Kyuubi as his rage overflowed. The shift in chakra signature was sensed by his three allies, and they all turned to face Naruto with worry in their eyes. Ishiko saw the shift as well and retreated, his face displaying a mixture of surprise and perplexity. Stuttering, Kyuubi tried to restrain the power that was screaming to be let loose. "Kid, you have to calm down. I can't hold it back," he said. Naruto grunted, suppressing the urge to kill that was about to take over. I can't, the power is too much. I have to get out of here." Naruto grasped the sides of his head and his eyes squeezed shut on the outside. His nails dug into his temples as he collapsed to his knees. "Naruto!" exclaimed Hiraku, his eyes full of worry. Sakura and Sasuke crouched on either side of him as the whole table hurried forward. Sakura put her hand on the boy's shaking shoulder and whispered, "Naruto, please calm down." Her eyes brimmed with concern, not for the demon's power that was urging its release, but rather for her comrade who was making a valiant effort to control it. Sasuke urged, "Just hold it back with that famous willpower of yours." Looking up, Naruto saw his teammates. His cheek whiskers were already more pronounced, and fangs were already sticking out of his mouth. His nails were embedded in his forehead, and tiny lines of blood were dripping down the sides of his face. Naruto snarled in an animalistic tone, "It's too late. I can't control it." He rose suddenly, careful not to show his face to the Kamakura warriors. He crashed into the door as he backed up, but with his newfound strength, he blew it off its hinges rather than stopping. Then he vanished in an instant, disappearing into an unidentified location. Final flashback: after a few minutes on the roof, the blonde had regained his stature, but he had not returned, not even for dinner. He had spent his time conversing with the Kyuubi, learning about their history as well as that of all the other Biju. He and the fox eventually became close friends after learning to cooperate and get along over the years. Naruto only used the Kyuubi's power when absolutely necessary or when his rage reached a breaking point. At that point, the evil side of the Kyuubi would emerge and attempt to subjugate the blonde. Although that aspect of Kyuubi's consciousness hadn't yet triumphed, the two found it increasingly difficult to suppress it as time passed and the incidents became more frequent. Additionally, the Kyuubi had come to respect his jailer. The fox occasionally missed the fun, but the blonde would hardly ever ask him for his chakra. However, the shinobi had become a favorite of the demon, who even considered him to be his best friend. That is, his only friend. "What?" Naruto asked, addressing the figure that had approached from behind. Ishiko sat down beside the prophecy and gazed into space, just like the shinobi. Naruto gave the boy a quick look but remained silent. He was using everything he had to avoid blowing up again. Ishiko asked quietly, "Why didn't you come down to eat? Everyone's been looking for you." His comment caused Naruto to scoff. His squad would simply find his chakra signature if they had to track him down. He was aware that they assumed he would prefer solitude. In response, Naruto complained, "Wasn't hungry." The leader pivoted, gazing straight into the boy's azure eyes. His eyes followed up to the spot on his head where Naruto's nails had made a gentle pink line. He squinted his eyes. Weeks would have passed before the holes turned into scars. Ishiko said, "You care to explain what happened back there?" Naruto let out a sigh. The blonde said plainly, "You've got your secrets, I've got mine." Ishiko looked intently at the boy as he studied him. However, Naruto didn't appear to be fazed. In fact, he gave the look a direct glare in return. Ishiko asked, "How am I supposed to trust you if you keep things from me?" Naruto gave a shrug. "You need to believe me when I say that I am committed to Kamakura's side. That's all I can offer," replied Naruto. With a thoughtful frown, Ishiko nodded. Following a brief period of silence, Ishiko revealed, "Hiraku told me what really happened." Naruto was taken aback, and his normally unflappable expression vanished in shock. "What?" asked Naruto naively. Ishiko chuckled. "Hiraku admitted that he was the one that rushed out there. He said you jumped out and saved his ass," Ishiko said with a grin. Naruto joined him in giggling. Ishiko's expression returned to seriousness. "I'm sorry I said all those things. It turns out I was talking about Hiraku, not you. I do hope you can forgive me." Ishiko offered an apology. Naruto gave a gentle smile. "I never was going to hold a grudge, and you know, It's not a crime that Hiraku saved the boy and his mother. He was reminded about what happened to him, and he didn't want to see it happen again. He did a bold thing, dashing into a camp with 30 men and one of the top 10 swordsmen, said Naruto. People get slaughtered every day, Naruto. That's how war is. Innocent people are murdered, even if they aren't in the war. I was taught that if you show emotion on the battlefield, all you're going to do is get yourself killed, Ishiko said. Naruto let out a sigh. Maybe. But when you fight for something you believe in, or for someone you care about, that's where you get true strength. If you're fighting for something important, nothing else will matter to you, not even your own well-being. As long as that something is safe. Naruto said. He remembered the words of a certain person and the memory of his first S-rank mission. Rewind with a faint smile on her face, the enigmatic girl inquired, "Do you have something precious?" Naruto's forehead furrowed in contemplation. Something valuable. When you have something, or someone truly precious to you to protect, that's when you become truly strong, she said. Naruto grinned his famously silly smile and nodded in comprehension. With a nod, the girl got up and started to leave. Haku retreated into the woods and said over his shoulder, "Oh, and by the way, I'm a boy." Final flashback recalling his response to Haku's news, Naruto laughed at the idea. When a warrior fights to protect something precious, their true strength emerges. You fight with your heart, and never give up. That's my ninja way. And it's been dead on so far, said Naruto. Ishiko grinned, pleased that despite the boy's youth, he had made much more progress than he had. Ishiko remarked, "You speak with a passion and wisdom I've never heard from someone so young." Naruto gave a shrug. "Experience," he said with a gentle smile. Ishiko's smile widening as he said the final few words, "I believe what you say is true, and I trust you will pass these traits down to Daisuke as well." Naruto turned to face the leader as his eyes grew wide. "You mean?" Naruto inquired, his face showing signs of excitement. Ishiko gave a nod. "Hiraku said he wanted you to train Daisuke instead. He said you've deserved it more than he did, that you earned it. Besides, I have him doing something much more efficient." Ishiko replied with a slight grin. Naruto looked at him bewildered. As he made his way to the stairs that led you off the roof, Ishiko responded, "Sword work. He's going to have to practice harder if he wants to be on the front line." Citing Naruto's world, Ishiko commanded, "You might want to get some sleep. I want you and Sasuke to start training your genin tomorrow morning." But he turned before the boy vanished. He said, "One more thing, what's an S-rank mission?" Naruto gave a quiet laugh. Naruto explained, trembling at the memory of the low-grade tasks they had to begin with in the beginning. The Hokage gives ninja missions, tasks they do for money and to help people in the nations. They can range from babysitting to assassinations. D rank are the easiest, like pulling weeds or cleaning rivers. Now, S rank is another story. These missions are suicidal, and there's not a solid chance he'll live. They usually consist of assassinations, tracking dangerous people and catching criminals with the highest bounty. Stuff like that. Naruto continued. With a doubtful look on his face, Ishiko questioned, "And you went alone on some of these missions?" Naruto gave a nod. "Most of the time. When Kakashi is around, we go together. I actually had my first S-rank mission a little while after we got out of the academy. Kakashi, Sakura, Sasuke, and I were a new team and only 12 years old at the time. Crazy stuff." Naruto replied with a grin. Ishiko nodded as he processed all of this information. Once again, Ishiko was clearly lost in his thoughts as he said, "Interesting, very interesting. Well, make sure you get some sleep." He smiled and began to descend the stairs. "Naruto, I have high hopes for you. You will, like your father, become a legend." The white walls separating the Kamakura's base from the outside world allowed sunlight to filter in. A certain blonde shinobi's room was covered in a blanket of light as it filtered through the north side windows. He lifted a hand against the sun as his eyes slowly opened. Slipping back into unconsciousness, he rolled over on his mattress. A gentle tapping on his door brought him back to the world of the living just as he was about to fade away from it. Naruto grunted, his voice whining like a little child's. With his hands buried deep in his pockets, the Uchiha prodigy strode into the room. With drooping eyes, Sasuke muttered, "Yo, Dobi. Get up, we have training." Naruto's eyes grew wide with memory. "Shit. I completely forgot." He sobbed as he leapt from his bed. He quickly put on his clothes and hurried out the door, nearly toppling the boy with the raven hair. In the room, the blonde poked his head back. "Are you coming or what?" "Come on Teme, we have training to do," he replied. Sasuke gave an eye roll. How come the Dobi had to be such an early riser? Down the corridor. Daisuke put on his sandals, which had a badly forged metal clasp and were made of rough leather. Ryuichi, his brother, was standing behind him, gazing out the window at the rising sun. As he approached the quiet boy with gray hair, Daisuke cried out, "How can you sit there and be so calm? We start our training today, and from the people in the prophecy. How lucky are we?" Ryuichi let out a sigh. His voice was quiet as he said, "I don't know, I'm just wondering, did we make the right choice, betraying Dad and all?" Instead of Daisuke's joyful face, a serious one replaced it. "You know it was for the best. I never agreed with Dad's way of dealing with things, and if I recall, neither did you," he responded. "I know, but what happens when Dad finds out? He isn't going to be happy, and he'll most likely order for our deaths," said the child. Daisuke's voice twisted into a confident tone as he responded, "Possibly, but I knew the risks for coming here. We know every secret of the Muromachi forces, we were at all of the meetings. The moment he sees us could very well be our last. But I took this risk because like Mom, we want this to end." "Mom," Ryuichi muttered, his voice barely strong. A hand was placed on his shoulder by Daisuke. "It would be better to avoid thinking about it. Focus on the future," the boy with the raven hair reminded them. His brother sighed and nodded. They were startled out of their reverie by a knock on the door. Their two trainers were visible when Daisuke leapt over the mattresses and opened the door. Sasuke murmured, "Meet us at the oak tree," and vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruto grinned widely and added in a sing-song voice, "Don't be late." Then he disappeared, moving too quickly for the boys to follow. As Ryuichi and Daisuke looked at each other, the pain and uncertainty gave way to wonder and excitement. They hurried to the yard after leaving the room. Field of training. With his arms folded across his chest, Sasuke leaned against the massive oak tree. The walls behind him crackled now and then, indicating that it was raining outside. Naruto was clinging to the underside of the tree with his chakra while dangling upside down on a branch. Looking up at the blonde, Sasuke asked, "What the hell are you doing?" The notorious Kai seal was clasped in front of the Chunnin's chest, and his eyes were closed. Sweat trickled down his brow as he said, "Working on my chakra control. I'm trying to put the smallest amount of chakra into my feet." He gritted his teeth and squeezed his eyes harder, drawing more chakra from his shoe soles. A tiny bit of his chakra remained, and he grinned. He would fall 30 feet to the ground if he were distracted in the slightest. A voice exclaimed, "Whoa, can you teach me that?" Which made Naruto lose his concentration and, eventually, his bond with the branch. From one of the tree's tallest branches, he fell to the ground. "Ack!" he exclaimed as he hit the ground, head first. He was lying in a sizable crater that was roughly 5 feet across after the dust had settled. Sasuke poked him with his foot and said, "You okay?" Ryuichi and Daisuke clambered up beside the Uchiha and looked into the hole. With labored breathing, Naruto heaved himself out of the rut. He said, more to himself than to the other three, "I had it. I finally had it." Sasuke grinned. Assuring the two boys, Sasuke said, "Yeah, he'll be fine." He grunted as he grabbed his comrade's arm and pulled him up, adding, "Come on Dobi, we've got class." Naruto rubbed his head and said, "Ah, okay, who's the runt that made me fall 3 stories?" The two Muromachi traitors blamed the other brother and pointed fingers at him. Sighing, Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose and said, "Okay, never mind, let's get to work." With a nod of agreement, both boys ran after the shinobi with the yellow hair. Sasuke laughed. He trailed behind the group and remarked, "This will be interesting." Field of training 2, Naruto said, "Okay, what kind of skills do you already have?" Ryuichi and Daisuke shrugged. Sasuke asked, "All right, then, how much experience do you have in battle?" Ryuichi answered, "None." "Training length?" asked Naruto. Daisuke replied with a naive smile, "We hadn't started training yet." As if in unison, Sasuke and Naruto looked at each other and sighed. Sasuke sighed, "We have a lot of work to do." "Okay, you take your kid, and I'll take mine. It'll be easier if we take them on one." "On .1," said Naruto. Sasuke gave a nod of agreement. He waved to Ryuichi, and the two of them headed for the troops' camp, which was beginning to move. Naruto looked at his pupil, who was giving him an enthusiastic look in return. With a dejected expression on his face, Naruto began, "Well, unfortunately for you and me, we have to start with the basics." The speech was about to be delivered. Uncertain whether to be scared or excited, Daisuke nodded. Recalling the day he met his sensei, Naruto remarked, "Okay, first are introductions. Name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, and dreams. Stuff like that. Well, my name is Daisuke Muramachi. I like all kinds of food and sword work. I dislike my father's thoughts on battle and needed bloodshed. My hobbies are working with a training sword, and my dream is to be known as a hero. To do something great that everyone will remember. That way they'll know that not ever Muramachi is bad," replied Daisuke. Naruto grinned and nodded. "I thought you hadn't started training yet. How could you be working with swords?" said Naruto. Daisuke smiled. "I always took the wooden ones from the troops' camp and practiced. I'm not very good though," he admitted with a sigh. "You'll get better. Hiraku is getting sword training. I'll see if I can pull some strings for you to get into the class too," he said with a grin. Daisuke's expression brightened significantly. "Could you? You're the best," he exclaimed, leaping to his feet. Watching the child bounce around as if he were receiving a new toy, Naruto grinned subtly. He made him think of himself as a child. He sat back down and listened carefully as he said, "What about you, sensei? You never told me all that stuff." He was curious about every detail of the teen who had been prophesied. He repeated what he had said a few years prior. "All right. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My likes are ramen and training. My dislikes are people who think they are at the top of the world. My hobbies are going on missions with my squad. My dream is to be Hokage, and a few side goals." Daisuke wanted to commit this information to memory, so he recalled every word. Daisuke asked, twitching in anticipation, "What are we going to start with first?" Sighing, Naruto searched for the first thing he had learned at the academy. How I wish I had listened all those times. Recalling some of the knowledge he had gained from the scrolls he had studied in his spare time back home, Naruto stated, "Okay, we're going to skip your history for mostly because I have absolutely no idea what your history is. So we'll start with basic stances for defense, offense, and speed. First would be defense. In a battle, it's very crucial that you hold your position right, or the enemy can breach you, and in the end injure or even kill you. Basically, a warrior's stance is the foundation of his knowledge, and a key thing to win the fight." Naruto went on. In a basic defensive position, he raised his hands to his chest, ready to attack, and slid his right foot behind him. You want to make sure you have a good footing, so when your opponent attacks, you will only slide back instead of lose your balance, and ultimately, your defense," he said. "Now, you always need to remember to keep your hands up by your chest, so if any of your vital areas, such as your neck, heart or head, is targeted, you can easily move up to defend them," he stated. Daisuke gestured for him to continue after nodding. He moved his hands into a new position and added, "This is the most effective stance I've ever used." His left hand was now out in front of his right, seemingly holding an invisible Rasengan, while his right was gripping a kunai. If an enemy soldier is rushing at you with their weapon drawn, this stance is best for 3 reasons. 1. You can grab the arm with the weapon with your left or stop a fist if that's what they're coming at you with," explained the soldier. He gestured with the kunai and said, 2. Once you've caught his arm side, you can disable his other arm with the weapon in your right. He concluded by dropping his stance and putting the kunai back in his holster at his shin. And 3. Now that he is unable to block or attack, you can take him out, whether going for the kill with your weapon, or simply knocking him out by dropping the weapon and pounding him with your fist. Grinning at the boy, he lifted his head. He said, "Any questions on the defensive stance?" Daisuke shook his head, attempting to commit everything he had just witnessed to memory. Naruto ordered, approaching his student, "Now you show me." The child with the raven hair leapt to his feet and positioned himself awkwardly, just like his sensei had done. The blonde studied the warrior's stance as he circled the motionless figure. "Tighten up your arms a little more. If your upper defense is weak, it's over before you even start," he said. Daisuke locked his arms forward and nodded dutifully. Naruto gave a satisfied nod. Good. Just remember to keep that right foot behind your body. It's a crucial part of the stance. Here, stand straight, but keep your arms in that position," said Naruto. Uncertain of what would happen, the boy followed instructions. Naruto approached him and gave him a chest push. Gently, but hard enough to knock him back a couple of feet, thrashing to stay upright. "See? You'll lose your poise if you don't have the foot to help you stay balanced and rooted to the spot, which can be a deadly mistake in combat," Naruto explained. "Now, get back into the stance." The trainee followed instructions and stood ready, and when he was pushed by Naruto this time, Daisuke only skidded back a few inches without showing any signs of being phased. "Have you noticed the difference?" Daisuke nodded, adjusting to the feel of the stance, wanting to know exactly how the perfect figure felt so he'd do it right every time. Naruto said, The position of your foot makes a big difference in the outcome. All right, we'll rehearse that later. Naruto began. Now, the offensive formation is a little bit more, but stopped when he noticed Sasuke and Ryuchi approaching them on foot. Naruto. Daisuke. We're having trouble. The two looked at each other and rushed up to meet them as Sasuke shouted, his eyes wide. What? What's the matter? Daisuke inquired. Kyoto and his troops are here. They have discovered the barrier of protection. Someone is attacking us. With Ishiko alone at the table and everyone else still asleep, Naruto, Sasuke, Daisuke, and Ryuchi ran toward the Kamakura compound, telling every warrior they encountered the news as they rushed into the dining hall and knocked a few soldiers over with the big swinging doors. Sasuke, Naruto. What's the matter? Observing the exhausted look on each of their 4 faces, he inquired. Kyoto. They're coming at you. Ishiko dropped the cup he was holding, and it broke into tiny pieces as it hit the ground. Sasuke explained, his face flushed. He said, let's go. They ran to the door, alerting each man they crossed and instructing them to report to the camp outside. They skidded to a stop at a junction of hallways, one leading to the rooms, one to the front door, and the final one to an unidentified location. I want you two to go out to the troops, Daisuke and Ryuchi. Meet up with anyone you encounter along the way. Go wake up the others, Naruto and Sasuke. Ishiko, who was already running down the 3rd hallway, gave the order, I'm going to search the place for anyone that we haven't come across yet. Sasuke and Naruto ran in the opposite direction, while the 2 boys ran down the corridor to the door. You get Hiraku, Sakura, and Kakashi. Sasuke paused at the closest door and said, I'll get the rest of them. Naruto nodded and began running toward the end of the hall, coming to a stop at Hiraku's door. He knocked quickly, the hollow sound bouncing off the hall walls, and a very exhausted looking boy opened the door a few seconds later, seemingly sleeping where he stood. Wamuja, he muttered, the words combining into a sentence that was impossible to read. Dude, get up. Damn it, Kyoto is almost right outside our door. Naruto shouted. Hiraku was awakened and on the clock at the sound of the commander's name. He grabbed his sword and ran, making his way to the door and, eventually, his arch-enemy. Naruto? What is happening? Sakura heard the commotion and yawned. Really, would you mind lowering the volume a little? Kakashi muttered as he supported himself against the doorframe. Naruto, sounding like a leader, commanded, get up you two, Muromachi forces found us. The two instantly jumped into action, a skill ninja are said to be born with, and their eyes widened as all signs of exhaustion disappeared. On your way out, gather as many troops as you can, Naruto said. Sasuke already got Alia, Masuru, and Kaya, before vanishing in a cloud of smoke. Front yard, headquarters for the troops, except for Sakura and Kakashi. Everyone was huddled around a table with a map of the area surrounding the barrier, and Naruto appeared inside the main tent of the camp, which was also used as the headquarters and was built especially for the higher-class warriors. At the moment, however, it was being used as a playing field station. How did they discover us? For once appearing to be alive and active, Alia asked, the protective force field is invisible to the human eye. I was aware of it. Those 2 scraps of Muromachi are spies. Masuru pointed a finger accusingly at the 2 young boys and yelled. They spoke to the outsiders and sent the location information to Kyoto. We kept everything from them. Why do you suppose it was us? Being the more audacious of the 2 brothers, Daisuke shot back. Since you are one of them, the boy with the raven hair shouted, his suspicions becoming even stronger. Now wait. They couldn't have tipped off the forces without our knowledge because these 2 were with us the whole time this morning. Masuru sneered, I mean, that's what we're trained for, Sasuke said. How about last evening? Without realizing it, they could have made a transmission with ease. Why ought I to believe what you say? Masuru obstinately answered. As Sasuke was about to respond, a burst of yellow diverted their attention, and in a matter of seconds, Naruto was directly in front of the enraged warrior. You're quite bold to say that. Since arriving here, we have been faithful to the Kamakura forces, and we will continue to do so. These 2 risked their lives to come here and join our side, but they didn't call in the outside forces. Give up attempting to place the blame on other fighters. Naruto calmly interrupted. You have to trust them in order for them to trust you. Masuru's angry expression gradually turned to one of guilt as he replayed the blonde's words in his head, letting out a sigh. You're right. It takes me a long time to learn to believe in someone other than myself because I've always struggled with trust. He looked at the shinobi in front of him and whispered, to be honest, I still don't really trust any of you guys. Naruto grinned subtly. I don't hold you responsible. In situations like these, it can be more difficult than usual to let people in because anyone could be a spy or a traitor. Masuru paused, then smirked. But try and believe me when I say, we are loyal to the Kamakura, and so are Ryuchi and Daisuke, he said, gesturing to the 3 ninja and the 2 trainees. He replied, I'll remember that, Naruto, said Chunin nodded, then turned to face Ishiko, who was observing the two with a faint smile on his face. What is the plan, then? Ishiko turned back to the enlarged map and nodded in appreciation as Naruto asked. Sasuke and Ryuchi told me that they discovered enemy soldiers on the side of the barrier that faces the archway, which is on the southernmost portion. Although that is the obstacle's weakest point, it was made to be impenetrable by standard human weapons. They will eventually realize that, even though they don't now. Ishiko began. Circling a tiny red mark on the oval's edge, I think they'll then plan to sit us out, waiting for one of us to stumble into their trap. What do you suggest we do, then? Asked Kakashi. Kaya proposed, we could send out our best squad to take them out. However, we are unsure of the exact number. One side outnumbering the other could happen either way. However, we must be cautious. Ishiko furrowed his brow in thought and said, besides, we'll have a big loss in this war if all of our best troops were sent out and slaughtered. Naruto was isolated from the rest of the quarreling group, lost in his own thoughts. I concur with Kaya that in order to defeat the enemy, we must send in our finest soldiers, Hiraku countered. War suicide, that is. Who could be so stupid as to do that? Alia shot back. Well, we're sitting ducks if we don't take action. Wedging himself into the front line, Daisuke remarked. A voice called out over the commotion, I'll go. Suddenly, there was silence, and everyone was staring at each other, wondering who had spoken. Naruto emerged on Ishiko's right side, his face radiating confidence. Ishiko, who had no doubts about the boy's strength, said, there is no way I am letting you go out there alone. However, they were unaware of the number of soldiers waiting for them outside, and sending one of his closest friends out there would not resolve the issue. I'm more than capable of looking after them. Naruto replied with a smirk, one jutsu, that's all I need. Daisuke scampered up to his sensei and barely looked at him. He met the blonde's defiant gaze and said, I'm going with you Naruto, sensei. You are a traitor from the Muromachi. They would rip you to pieces. Furthermore, I haven't yet imparted any valuable knowledge to you, Naruto answered. The child with the raven hair argued, you taught me that stance. For defense, yes. As Naruto clarified, we never got to offense. However, I can use the defensive stance to eliminate a warrior if they approach me. Daisuke thought, all I need is one of your knives. Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The boy was making a valid point, and he looked to Ishiko for support, but it appeared that the green-haired teenager agreed with his apprentice entirely. We won't leave you by yourself, Naruto. Sakura stepped up to stand beside him and remarked, we're a team, we do this together. After all, who else will save you from trouble? Sasuke added, emerging from the other side. With his arms wrapped around Sakura's and Sasuke's shoulders, Kakashi remarked, and I'm not letting you kids have all the fun. Naruto grunted and said, guys, it would be best if I went alone. Ishiko walked over to stand in front of the blonde, who was struggling to escape his team's grasp, and demanded, Naruto, as your leader, I am commanding that you be accompanied by your squad, the Kamakura 5 and our 2 newest trainees. The boy looked at his leader uncertainly, and Ishiko gave him a slight smile. Everything will be all right. We've dealt with these guys before, he promised, and Naruto's uneasiness subsided as anticipation took over. Naruto grinned broadly and said, I've been waiting for a rematch with that girl. Sasuke's silly smile briefly appeared at the mention of the Muromachi girl, but it vanished as soon as it did. All right, group, let's leave, Ishiko ordered as he strode from the tent. Beyond the barrier. Remain in your places. A noise that sounded like water suddenly filled the area near the front, and the commander turned his head toward the commotion, a savage smile spreading across his face. Kyoto called from his horse, circling the troop. He had gathered about 100 soldiers, along with his most elite and trusted soldiers, and he wasn't going to underestimate them again. This time, he was going to kill them all. The boy with whom he wanted a rematch more than anything else suddenly appeared, grinning and strolling out of space. Kyoto, come get your ass whooped once more. Kyoto sneered as Naruto called out, cracking his knuckles. He shot back, luck is on my side this time. Naruto gave a small laugh. With ease, he assumed a basic stance and responded, I don't need luck, I have skill. You're not skilled enough to fight us by yourself. Kyoto chuckled, making a genuine smile at the thought. Naruto grinned. Naruto cued the warriors on the other side of the barrier and said, "Actually, beating the S out of all of you would be a great workout, but I decided to share a piece of the action with my friends this time." Kyoto was about to laugh when he saw who had left, but his breath caught in his throat. The prophecy, the remaining Kamakura warriors, and the two traitors entered the battlefield in a line that gave the impression that everything had been planned. Kyoto knew that, with their combined skill, with the exception of the two traitorous maggots, they could destroy them, but his initial shock and fear were soon replaced by a victorious and evil expression. Kyoto spit into the crowd and said, "This will just make his job easier, and with all of you out of the way, this war will be won." "What are they doing?" Sakura muttered as she saw the men in black clothing separating to create a small walkway in the middle. Did he say, he? Ishika wondered, perplexed, but his confusion was swiftly dispelled and replaced by fear when he saw the man approaching them. The man who was feared throughout the nation, the one who killed innocent people as a way to kill time, the one who initiated this entire conflict in the first place, the one who knew a method that could kill them instantly. "So, you are the prophecy that was prophesied?" Although Naruto had never seen this warrior before, he was able to make a fairly accurate guess thanks to the deep, gruff growl in the man's voice. "Dad?" With dread on their faces, Daisuke and Ryuchi whispered together. "Tiger Star?" As the fear gripped the Kamakura warriors standing there, Daisuke and Ryuchi actually began to tremble. "W. What will we do to Daisuke?" Ryuchi's voice cracked a lot as he whispered, "H. He's definitely going to K. Kill us now." The raven-haired boy, for once, remained silent and simply shook his head weakly, his eyes never leaving his father. If one of the Kamakura Force's most outspoken fighters was so terrified, it was bad news for them. Naruto reassured them, "Calm down you two." The menacing sensation vanished, only to be replaced by resentment and hatred for the man in front of him. "I can take him on solo." "Are you angry? When you left your world, did you happen to leave your common sense behind?" With his eyes full of surprise and incredulity, Ishika whispered as loudly as he could. Both scowled at Sasuke's response for the blonde, "Can't lose what you never had." "The prophecy is me." With his back to the waiting enemy, Naruto reminded Tiger Star, "And it is my sole duty to take this guy down." Tiger Star was not pleased at all. In an attempt to frighten the living daylights out of the blonde in front of him, the dark leader snarled, "Down, take your eyes off the enemy." Naruto waved a hand behind him to signal for silence. "Yes, I will speak with you shortly, but in the meantime, would you please grant us some privacy?" "Here, I'm attempting to speak." The Muromachi practically flushed in rage as Naruto shot back. The boy had ignored him at first, and now he was telling him to wait for a fight? "No, you pay attention. You may have vanquished some of my most proficient soldiers and one of my finest swordsmen, but..." "Really?" Kyoto turned rose red and rushed into the path as Naruto sneered. "I guess you don't have very intelligent warriors then, seeing we took them down in a matter of minutes." "You destroyed Kyoto?" Tiger Star, clearly taken aback by the boy's declaration, turned to one of his best commanders and gave him a barely perceptible glare. "I was told that Hiraku did," he said. "Well, the boy must have received a lot of instruction. In addition, I happened to get a cold that week, which left me weak." The commander stammered, obviously upset about being apprehended. Everyone on the Muromachi side widened their eyes when Naruto screamed, "I hadn't touched a sword in my life before that day." "Never?" Naruto shook his head, and Kyoto squeaked, helpless and utterly ashamed. "Even whether I was holding the thing correctly was uncertain to me." Naruto honestly responded, "I just did what I saw in the movies," which caused the commander to gasp or cry. "Beaten by a novice." He lowered his head in shame and wailed softly to himself, but the vulnerability quickly disappeared and was replaced by a resolute glare. "I will beat you this time, and you won't survive." He growled, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. "Not Kyoto." The man wilted slightly as Tiger Star yelled, "You already lost once, and I am not willing to risk another loss on your part." He muttered, "Yes sir." His face was heavy with depression, but his eyes told a different tale. The message he carried inside his charcoal irises screamed at the blonde, "I will get my revenge." The man then disappeared into the sea of red and black. "Are you prepared to give up now?" Tiger Star inquired. "Give up?" asked Naruto, cocking his head in bewilderment. Tiger Star was furious, wondering how a boy could be so stupid as to not understand the meaning of the most basic words. Unbelieving that the boy didn't understand the meaning of the word, Hiraku muttered, "It means to give up. Throw in the flag. Or basically tossing your pride in the fire and watching it burn there." Despite boasting of his exceptional skills, Hiraku didn't believe the boy. "I am aware of its meaning. What do you think I am, a fool?" Naruto sighed, rolling his eyes. When Sasuke opened his mouth to respond, Naruto added, no comment. In that case, what in hell are you doing? Sakura asked, unsure of the precise direction of the fight, and Naruto grinned. Everyone started to perspire as Naruto laughed and said, I like to watch him squirm. Sasuke muttered, I think he's more of an idiot than he was all those years ago. He hadn't believed it was possible, but he was again shown to be mistaken. The raven-haired shinobi beside him had also noticed that his pupil was cowering behind his back, so Daisuke told his sensei, who had crawled up to stand behind him, making dad mad isn't the best idea. Why not? It's hilarious. You ought to give it a shot sometime, Naruto replied, his arrogant demeanor still evident today. He has a history of losing his temper easily. Naruto followed his student's gaze and closely examined the blade as Daisuke explained, and when he gets mad, before he trailed off, simply staring at his old man's sword. A piece of metal, big deal. In an attempt to avoid calling the man's attention to his treacherous sons who shuddered just a few feet away, Naruto muttered, one jutsu and that'll be out of the picture. Daisuke shook his head. No, that sword cannot be destroyed. It was made from the scales of the last dragon, the only one left in the land that had not been killed during his time. The black-haired boy tried desperately to get his sensei to stop making fun of his father because he knew that if he did, he would undoubtedly die. It can withstand all the elements and it contains the power to blow away the entire world, on the right night that is, he said. You don't understand. Naruto waved the boy away and remarked, there are guys like this every day from where we come from. Resuming the conversation, Ishiko said, not all of them are slayers of the innocent. Sakura came to Naruto's side and corrected him, saying, actually, most of them are. With his jaw clenched at the memory of his former master, Sasuke remarked, I'd say Orochimaru was the worst. You know, what about Gaara back when he was pure evil? Kakashi stood up, joining the battle. Who is Orochimaru? What about Gaara? Squeezing into the argument, Kaya said, this isn't making any sense, we don't know who they are. Yes. Hiraku agreed, although he was no longer entirely certain of the circumstances. With a casual expression on her face and a hint of laughter in her eyes, Alia muttered, you guys argue about the stupidest things. Masuru muttered, seriously, with a deep sense of amusement. Still unsure of his role with his father observing their every action, Ryuchi muttered, I'm lost. He was furious just because the boy had disobeyed him, ignored him, and now everyone was talking to themselves, which made him feel completely out of place. Tiger Star never experienced that. Enough. The leader's angry voice reverberated throughout the clearing as he roared. Hey, we're attempting to communicate here, Naruto shouted in response, his eyes amusing. With steam practically pouring out of his ears, the man snarled, you will not ignore the Tiger Star prophecy. She whispered, I have a name you know. The biggest threat in the world cannot be back. Sast. For the first time in a long time, Kyoto raised her voice and yelled. The lid was on the verge of blowing when Tiger Star growled, he's right, prophecy. Na.ru.to. Furious that the jerk in front of him was treating him like a piece of furniture, Naruto screamed, say it with me. The tiger growled and spat out the name like venom, saying, I will give you one last chance to turn yourselves in Naruto. Naruto grinned. Tiger Star's frown deepened until it seemed to be about to fall off his face as he responded, not a chance. He broke the simple sentence up for effect. Tiger Star jumped off his horse and declared, you all will pay the price for standing in the way of my ambitions. Tiger Star's rage erupted and spilled over, filling his very being with hatred for the boy. Naruto replied, just try it, kitty cat. With a ferocious war cry, he charged, directly aiming for the shinobi that had been foretold. Sitting Indian style, facing a painting of a man who wielded the sword Tiger Star currently possessed, was a small old man who had been employed by Tiger Star for as long as he could remember. The position had been passed down through his family for nearly 8,000 years. He was located many miles away from the unidentified battle that was starting to break out. The planets would align and the forever solstice would come very soon. The man's eyes would shine brightly on that day, releasing a powerful orb that would ravish and destroy the entire area. Tiger Star would accept that power into his body and mind, and the world would end with a bang. Naruto grinned and clenched his fists as the other warriors interpreted their leader's charge as an invitation to attack, raising their swords and charging directly at the Kamakura soldiers. He growled, sounding in the least bit animalistic, let's go wild. The 11 Kamakura warriors jumped into the battle with a surge of adrenaline. Alia's perspective, my attacker unarmed me, knocking my weapon all the way to the other side of the clearing, and I smirked as I let my guard down for a moment, causing my fist to smash into the face of the nearby Muromachi. I never imagined that the sensation of their blood running down my hand would feel so good. I was twirling in a tight circle when my bow staff took out about 6 warriors at once, sending them flying back into the trees behind them. That sounded wicked. Point of view of Hiraku. Even to this day, I can still hear the sickening sound of metal tearing through flesh when my blade struck a soldier's leg, killing them. But I had no other option, fight or die. And until Kyoto was dead at my feet, I was not going to sleep. Masuru's point of view. The sharpened arrow struck its target, the mid-shoulder, a pressure point only I knew about, and the man fell to the ground, unconscious. I looked around, looking for my comrades, and saw a few smoking bodies scattered on the ground to my left. Sasuke. I sighed deeply. Must everything be resolved by death and combat? I suppose I had no choice at the moment, and with that in mind, I ran back into the riot. Daisuke's point of view. I was fighting people I had known for as long as I could remember, and the fact that my father was out there, somewhere, didn't help. All I had was one of my sensei's knives and the small amount of knowledge he had given me earlier this morning. It already felt like decades had passed since then. I simply cut the muscles in their arms and legs, making them immobile but not dangerous. I danced lightly on my toes and turned to see another familiar face with a shocked expression, wondering if that was the face I would see when I found my dad. I didn't have the heart to kill any of them because I had known them too well. Ryuichi's point of view. It was difficult, and my aversion to conflict made it even more difficult, but I knew I had to do this even though I knew my older brother was only a few feet away. I was surrounded by people I knew, faces I recognized, and people I had spoken to. I would go to any lengths for my mother and my new friends. Kaya's point of view. I had the strangest taste in weapons, or at least that's what Hiraku told me the first time we fought. 2 small twin scythes were gripped tightly in my hands. They were a strange choice and typically only used by men, but I used them early on, well, before my family was killed, you know. One of the warriors was pursuing our leader, Ishiko, who was surrounded by his own group of soldiers, utterly unaware, and completely exposed. I threw the metal projectile, which spun through the air and lodged itself in the running man's back, and he grunted as the Muromachi fell to his knees and then to the ground. Ishiko turned, realizing that his death had been just a few steps away, and gave me a grateful smile before locking blades with another approaching man. At least they're light. Ishiko's perspective. I'm glad Kaya saw that warrior before he decapitated me. I'll make sure to give her the proper thanks when I'm done with these guys. His blade kept slamming into the man's, neither of them getting a good blow at the other. Finally, tired of him, Ishiko kicked out with his leg, sweeping the soldier's feet out from under him. As he fell, the green-haired teen stabbed the man in the shoulder, rendering his arms useless. The warrior lay there, writhing in agony, searching the clearing for his companions, and he saw Sakura a short distance away, doing pretty well by herself. Sakura's point of view. It would be an understatement to say that the warriors were shocked. More accurately, they would require some therapy after this. Tsunade. Sama's strength surged through my fist, and I smashed it into the ground, uprooting a good portion of the field in a single motion. Who else liked to play with fire? I rolled my eyes as a burst of flame sped past my shoulder, burning nearby bodies to a crisp, the blood curdling screams echoing across the field. Sasuke's point of view. My innate need for fire and my connection to the flames themselves were not my fault. They simply made me feel like a 5-year-old again, when everything was fine and my parents were still living. Alternatively, when he was alive. For now, these Muromachi bastards would take the hatred away from my brother. I wanted nothing more than to destroy my brother, to watch him die before my eyes, just as he had made me watch our parents perish before mine all those years ago. Another stream of fire flew from my mouth, leaving behind minor burns. I had grown accustomed to them over the years. For a short time, at least. Kakashi's point of view. For a Junin like me, this just seemed like a workout, but I was smart enough to know that this was only half of their numbers. No leader would be foolish enough to lead their entire army into their enemy's yard, but then again, if they had all been present, they would have lost the moment they entered the battle. I easily knocked out the man next to me with a round-house kick to the head, and then I turned around to see a new wave of warriors. Beyond that, the worst thing I could have seen, the thing I feared the moment we emerged from the barrier. Alia's perspective, his lack of knowledge surprised me. Masuru's point of view. What on earth is that fool thinking he's doing? Daisuke's point of view. No, I can't let my father take someone away from me once more. Ryuichi's point of view. He couldn't defeat him on his own. Ishiko's perspective. I specifically told him not to. Kaya's point of view. Is he unaware of the fact that we all depend on him? Sakura's point of view. No, please. Sasuke's point of view. No more shit, no more shit, no more shit. Kakashi's point of view. Although he is strong, his strength is insufficient. They stood, motionless as stone, facing each other in the middle of it all, one with an unusually serious expression, the other with an angry one. Both of them staring at the defiant warrior in front of them as though attempting to set him on fire. Tiger Star growled, "One of us will die here today." His opponent slid into a stance in retaliation. Naruto replied, "Then start your good byes."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.